This is a robbery!
Down, motherfucker!
Okay, people, folks to the front! Let's go!
I can't.
No one cared who you were until you put on the mask, and maybe the mask is all they care about. A mask hides your identity, your intent, but over the surface layer, the decoration is a projection of something bigger than yourself. A new sense of identity, of how you hope the world will see you. But the mask isn't the paint. The mask is the entire thing, the plastic and foam and mesh. The inner mechanisms are structurally important or the whole thing starts to fall apart. The surface layer isn't enough. It might look right in motion, but that means it's fleeting. That quote, the putting on the mask thing, that's from The Dark Knight Rises, the same trilogy of films that gave us bank robbers and clown masks and suits.
You know that intro sequence in Batman?
Yeah.
You go like, you know, you have to do something about that.
Yeah,
you have to make a game.
Payday is a franchise that wears its inspirations on its three-buttoned sleeve. One of the first things you'll see when playing the latter installments is that Batman reference, as it's the achievement unlocked for putting on your clown mask and robbing your first bank. Yeah, we're all influenced by something. But what is Payday, other than its inspirations? What message, if any, are its creators trying to project? Well, if we're going off the masks, it's that they're clowns. But it's not that simple. It's never that simple. Because underneath the mask is still inevitably a person, a human being working to create a show. And sure, sometimes they really are a clown, but isn't that just right? Clowns are entertainers. Who am I to see clowns and complain they've made themselves a circus? When instead, I could get in on the act.
Branch bank. There's an armored transport carrying precious cargo. There's some high-tech loot at the Neon Cradle nightclub. One of the most prestigious banks in New York City. If things go south, we know you can handle it. Done this a million times before, but hey, there's no rest for the wicked.
Back in my element, feeling it, shooting cops, bagging lots of loads of dosh. Making this game look good is easy. I can shoot to the beat, I can edit to the beat. Get a rhythm going in shots and clips of satisfying hits and put it out to applause. The audience loves their Payday 2. I can make it look fun, can I? I could probably sell people on this game, huh? Be something of an influencer for this product. Check it, there are cops in corridors and crossfire with criminal clowns clad in covert ceramic lava. The flag is striped and stars aligned. The guns are firing and helmets are flying. Armed like tanks and robbing banks. Slick presentation on some instant gratification. Isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this Payday 2?
Oh, and my game crashed.
Making a game look good is a different skill set from making it feel good to play. But those skills aren't unrelated. Gameplay feedback differs from a satisfying edit, or a live stream demonstration, or a kiosk preloaded with a vertical slice of heist. Yet, the final game release is a package in and of itself, is it not? A little self-contained show on a screen, trusting players to play the game right. Everything the game gives and says to the player influences the experience. However, what looks right to a spectator isn't always what plays right. Getting a game to do both is tricky. Esports, for instance, have to navigate the issue of professional players' footage being less impressive to a general audience than it is to those who play the game competitively themselves, which of course is a much smaller demographic. Being good at the game often ends up looking like a lot of standing in one spot, sudden sharp movements, not taking an action which most players would consider obvious because the professional is acting on something less visual. I could get even more broad. Gunfights that look good in movies often don't make a lot of sense practically. Foley work is exaggerating the actual sounds objects make to get something more descriptive than reality. So much of modern media production is creating the physically impossible so that the final performance matches audience expectation. But to take that approach to game design is to quite literally ask the impossible of your developers. Player behavior is a form of reality which differs from the aesthetic expectations of games themselves, particularly those from prospective financial investors. So to create a game that looks right, even when it interferes with playing right, means compromises must be made. Payday 3 is a compromised game, and I'm gonna talk about it today. And in trying to make a good-looking video, I'm probably gonna make this game look good as well. It ain't hard. I could just edit out all the bullshit. Wouldn't want to put off potential players now, would we? Or the investors, but they're not gonna play the game themselves. Or watch a fucking video, I say. Maybe pop a squat at a kiosk at best. If executives can't see the bugs, they're not priority. If the fans aren't making a scene, then there's no scene to make. No scene to break. Man, am I gonna start making bug compilations again? Build and analysis videos? Am I really coming back as a Payday YouTuber? Fuck no! I'm just a YouTuber making a video about Payday. If you're new here, the deal is I used to make videos about one game in particular, Payday 2. They were decently popular. I wound up getting to know a couple of the devs, community managers, got to interview a voice actor or two. Feels like years ago at this point, because it was. It was in late 2018 that Payday 2's plot seemed to be coming to a natural conclusion, and after a couple years making videos on it, I wanted to do more stuff. So I changed the game. They call me Sam Reich the way I've been here the whole time. And because I'm a dropout, I've been making videos, writing articles. I investigated a charity, been chipping away at writing a game of my own. And all that while, Payday 2 kept going to variant success. I wasn't sure how to feel about the game still chugging along as it had been. Sort of felt like when they announced a fourth John Wick movie. Oh my god, it's a cinematic universe now too? Look, I had fun with the first couple, but after spinning on the same core concept for too long, you run out of tricks. Dealing with the same old engine restraints, performance issues, all this legacy infrastructure you have to maintain to release a new update for what was, at that point, a computer-only title. The console versions occasionally got a spit shine, but will forever remain woefully out of date. Payday 2 was an absolute jalopy of a video game, burning diesel fumes in its wake. Why keep updating it? Well, it's where the players were. Between overconfident, clout-chasing spending sprees, disastrously premature hype campaigns for games delayed for years, and scope-blown, under-delivered product launches, the developmental and publishing studio we know as Overkill Starbreeze consolidated what they had and then sold off the rest. Intellectual properties and investorial promises sold for scrap to pay off debt. Thus, the combined company Starbreeze Studios was left with little but the cash machine that is Payday 2. So, that's how it is then. Payday 2 is old code, but it still checks out. It can exist perpetually as its own little gaming platform. Problem being, before everything broke bad for the company, one of Starbreeze's overconfident, premature announcements of a scope-blown game was Payday 3. Payday 2 might have been revived, but even still, if the Payday studio announces it's canceling its next Payday game, well then that's the end of the road, right? Investors would balk, they'd have to give up on ever re-entering the console market. No matter their opinion, Starbreeze had no choice. They made a promise. Payday 3, on paper anyways, started production in May 2016. It then released in September of 2023. Still, if you're gonna be shedding your legacy title to start fresh, this is how you do it. Upgrading to the Unreal Engine, check. Graphical overhaul, check. Crossplay and guaranteed console updates, check, checkity check. Addressing some of the biggest problems with Payday 2, this all looks great. I'll admit, when I finally let myself watch the Payday 3 gameplay trailer pre-launch, I was intrigued. It looked promising. I wasn't planning to buy it, nor did I want to dissuade people's good time with it. So I kept quiet, let the game do its own thing. Payday 3 by Starbreeze Studios came out on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation late last year to reviews. Well, hey, both Payday the Heist and Payday 2 had less than fantastic reviews on launch. Maybe as before, I'll see something in it that they don't. So you wanna know what I think? Do you actually want videos on this game from me? Me specifically. See, I'm talking to you, people who leave comments asking when are Payday 3 videos happening. You think the thing that you might really want is a community with some focus? It doesn't have to be, nor should it be expected to be, any one individual in particular. You may want a creator, but Starbreeze wants an influencer. Y'all got your YouTubers, your people, happily here to enjoy the community what can. Good for them, I'm no competition. I'm not one for parades or bringing rain. Just here to report the weather. I've read their reviews, watched some videos, and the common refrain I've heard about the state of Payday 3 is, let them cook. Give the developers time. Critics and fans were shockingly aligned on this. The game felt unfinished in a lot of ways, if you could even play it at all. We'll get to all of that. Consensus was, the game had a terrible first impression, but could be solid with time. Sounds like a lot of games these days. I'm thinking of Cyberpunk 2077, Warhammer Darktide, damn, even Redfall squeaked in a massive update right over the finish line of the studio shuttering. Well, it's been over a year since launch. The game has cooked up and cooked off, and here's me checking in, hoping I've hit that purity window. Did they name the update after the Maria meme? I need an update! Operation Medic Bag was Starbreeze's acknowledgement of Payday 3's horrific launch. Payday is hurting and is patching itself up, you see. For several months, plans for these updates were a slow, infovenous drip to the community. And during that time, I burned way too many hours on this game, really sinking my teeth into the ship. See, I got gifted Payday the 3rd by my friend Jay, that's E3K Hatena. She saw me add it to my wish list the day I decided I was gonna make a video and wanted it off there as soon as possible for my mental health. That was around the beginning of May 2024, so post-syntax error, post-adaptive armor, post-month of launch non-functionality.
You should have known.
But during the reveal rollout release of Poison Brew, Houston's Reinstance, and GameStop trades, I reached 150 levels in as many hours, the first 100 of which using the old challenges system. The XP overhaul made those last 50 levels pretty linear. We'll get there, eventually. Point being, I was playing this game right in the middle of its potential revitalization, its big second chance. I saw it at its most functional pre-reworks and kept playing through its several major updates intended to draw players back. So, I am going to do my best to review this game as it is now, at time of this video's production, with one eye towards the future, promises of upcoming features, updates, and DLC, but another eye on the past. There's a good chance a lot has happened with Starbreeze and this game since I've posted this video. But if I don't talk about what used to be a problem, you'd be missing so much of the picture. First impressions last a lifetime, and Payday had quite a few put-down problems on release. Stuff that would make a player refund or give up before even getting a chance to properly play the game. We can't just pretend all that shit didn't happen, right? The broken technology, the strained communication. Decisions being made now are informed by the way things used to be, the way games used to be. Because it's not just Payday. Payday 3 isn't unique, and by the end of this piece, I intend to justify that sentiment. Everything Starbreeze and its prior shapes have ever released and promised and lied about has led us to this point. Years of terrible decisions, squandered goodwill, and a family being torn apart. Trust me, this video is about Payday 3, and one of these days, I'll be reviewing it nice and proper. But we've got to go the long way around. It would be unfair. No, it would be insulting to the people who worked on this game to not show you what happened before they got here. I've chaptered the story for you, so please take your time watching this video. Take breaks as you need. As I hope you'll understand by the end of it, some things shouldn't be rushed. You see, answering the question, why is Payday like this, is a complicated tale that speaks to a wider issue. The games industry devaluing labor while swallowing itself whole, turning its communities into armies of unofficial brand ambassadors, and chasing bags to make up for the money lost chasing clout. Payday isn't responsible for the ills of the modern games industry, at least not entirely, but it's become something of a face for a couple of them. A face representing greed, echo chambers, hype machines, and a whole nebula of broken games and developers, bent into someone else's vision of a nostalgic, cruel mask. So let's ask about before then, before the mask. Nobody cared, huh? Well, alright, I'll bite. Who were you? Okay. Where to start? Almost none of the developers who worked on Payday the Heist over a decade ago still work on Payday 3. That isn't a derogatory statement, nor is it a positive one. It's just a fact. So, what happened to the original crew? It all starts with the tale of two sons. Meet the Anderson brothers, Ulf and Bo. A pair of Swedish programmers were born across the late 1970s, came up on the tail end of the Cold War. Bo's a talkative sort, Ulf's more reserved, and since Sweden has conscription, they were likely both on reserve at some time or another. Bo was a soldier. He credits instruction from exchange SAS teachers to his resiliency in the business world, and claims to have seen active combat that he was shot at. Would like some more sources on that than just him, but chances are if that info even is online, it'd be in Swedish. Still, I believe him. And he'd go on to design combat and UAV simulators for the US Army, so they probably believe him too. Ulf, on the other hand, was taken in by games going as far back as the Amiga. He played Another World when he was young. You might know it as Out of This World, and when he got to the credits and saw that it was developed by, largely, a single person, art, code, all of it, it made him realize he could learn how to do the same. Make games from scratch his way. He doesn't want to make other people's games. He can't stand designing for a boss's vision rather than his own. He prefers working with small teams on projects he's personally passionate about. The Andersons' mother was very supportive of her boy's creative pursuits, tinkering with 3D models and cutting-edge software. After a couple failed tries to get hired at various Swedish game studios, Ulf's creative vision and Bo's determination took shape as their own company, Grin, in summer of '97. Around about the same time I was born. It turns out that making a game is incredibly difficult, no matter how hard you work yourselves. Bo needed investment, and Ulf needed people. Developers with similar interest, similar drive. This is the turn of the century. The future of games has gone from bleak to blowout. So, the Andersons went online. Started asking around in forums and IRC for people who can make models, music, code, and if so, you're willing to move to Stockholm? To develop games, it would help to have an engine. That's the base layer of software in which the game exists, renders, accepts input, and creates output. Tech was changing fast, and licensing an engine costs a pretty penny and necessitates connections which Grin did not yet have. So they opted to purpose-build their own tools. To get a developmental engine built, they tapped the talents of Niklas Gray and Tobias Persson, along with a bunch of other people who'd contribute bit by bit and then move on to other stuff. The product of all of this was the Diesel engine. These days, that name is shorthand in some communities for a game that runs poorly, feels stiff. It doesn't help that the first game Grin built on it, Ballistics, was intentionally trying to push the boundaries of performance and avoid complex physics interactions. It was meant to be paired with NVIDIA's cutting-edge GeForce 3 series, but this was pre-PhysX days. A game that is cruel to your hardware but sweet to your eyes. I feel like Does It Run Crisis being memified years later made some of us forget just how obsessed gamers have always been with making their hardware overheat on purpose. Now that said, I've been unfair to the Diesel engine in the past. I would describe it as a developer-first engine.
Yeah, oh, when I had to learn Diesel, it was like, no documentation at all. I mean, you had like an old wiki or something with like incomplete and like deprecated things in there. And then there was one folder on a Google Drive where people had tried to make a tutorial on how to create a unit, which is also like 7 years old. And you're like, okay, I guess this is how you do it.
It was made to just work for whatever ideas these Swedes came up with, and meant to turn around games in months, not years. It was intentionally lo-fi, but highly configurable. You could get it to render complex 3D terrains just as easily as new weapons, vehicles, props. One Martin Warren, who joined Grin to do 3D modeling, is credited with creating Diesel's world editor, which, according to those who used it, was pretty damn good.
Control-Z was added in 2015. So before that, they had no Control-Z. So if you made an error, sucks to be you.
And who else was at Grin? Let's see. Anders Bodbaka joined to produce technical art. A couple other people who aren't strictly relevant to our story here. Some others who wouldn't come along till later. Is there anyone else?
Payday.
Oh, yes. That's Simon Wiklund, who would later change his name to Vikland so Brits would stop calling him Wiklund. I would like to thank Simon for being such a sentimental person, because his Instagram was very useful in establishing a timeline here. He's been gaming since his NES days, would record the music from Mega Man onto tapes so he could listen to it at school. He joined Grin in the year 2000 to do sound design and music for games, spent his first check on a digital mixing station. I fucking adore Simon's music, not just for itself, but also the way he conceptualizes songs for projects. I describe his sound as hip-hop leaning synth-pop techno rock. Boppy drums, catchy synth waves, and guitar licks my hands are just incapable of forming. But really, he can work in pretty much any genre with at least some skill. Simon is a techno maestro. It's not a stretch to say his music is a big part of why the Grin guys kept seeing success. His songs are just that catchy. His Payday tracks have millions of listens on YouTube. Razormind alone's got 16 million. But Payday hasn't happened in our story yet. We're in Y2K, baby, and right now he's just banging out the tunes for Grin's weird little racing game. So Grin has a fuzzy number of people, some coming, some going, but our core three are Simon, Ulf, and Bo. Now, Bo had been paying attention to the scene at the turn of the century and concluded that the problem with the games industry was the developers. He called them risk generators. His thinking was that the whole it takes as long as it takes approach to development was bullshit, and that those people just needed some discipline to reach their potential. If they aren't personally invested in their part of the project, find them something else to work on that they are. And if they're not keeping up with you, you replace them. Now, when I say all of that, it might sound unartistic and abrasive, like an ideologically inverted indie studio. Yet when Bo says this stuff, he uses all these slick acronyms and business speak. He really sells you on how game studios need to behave more like tech startups. Bold stance coming off the .com bubble, but I see a point in there. No amount of whining about mistreatment will make a publisher cater to their developer. The market demands a quick turnaround. So the two halves need to be working together. Publishers can't sit around and wait for the game to be ready on its own. By then, the cultural moment may have already passed. Developers can't keep changing the vision as whims or trends call for, so they need to commit to one quickly and confidently. Bo's approach to managing Grin was to have a small team of developers who were always on the same page as the publisher, and that way, the stock price won't go down. And you make better games faster, apparently. Let's see about that. Ballistics, this tubular light bike pod racing game, dropped in 2001. The core of the game was apparently built in a matter of months, and for the time, it certainly was impressive. Incredibly fast gameplay, complex cyberpunk tracks, it had digitally released patches and community forums, moderated by Bo himself. This game was something else at the time, though some reviews said Ballistics was mostly showing off and the actual gameplay was lacking. But hey, maybe they just didn't get it. I certainly couldn't. My photosensitivity is a little much to be behind the wheel. This footage is from First Plays here. Funny thing, among the other nostalgia, there was a comment on this video of someone going, "Oh yeah, I loved that game. It was buggy and crashed a lot, but still." Sound familiar? See, the problem with this developer-first at publisher-speed approach to game design, aside from the unpaid overtime, is a lack of iteration. Cranking out your first good-enough version to meet a deadline doesn't get you a very functional product. No amount of QA testing can fix jank if the jank is foundational. If trying to fix one issue somehow breaks the entire engine because each cheap component was built on scaffolding of temporary fixes, on a timeline informed by how fast you got the last cheap component working. Sorry, Bo, if you want games that hold up to scrutiny, it does actually take as long as it takes. I'm not a fan of this Boeing ideology, because you see, GameCraft is a bit like Planecraft. If you cheap out and bash together the inner workings, sure, maybe the customers won't notice. Things won't go wrong for most people, until one small mechanism breaks, and the entire thing crashes. No amount of prettied up visuals during operation can save a product which fails to operate. If you don't take time to clean up, optimize, work around edge case scenarios, then your game's rough around the edges and will scrape some people right off. You can't guarantee people's hardware, which should be compatible with the game, will actually work with software made so inelegantly. How do you test for long-term stability if the game's development cycle ends before any long-term? That said, this end product shell design for games can work. as an arcade cabinet, with guaranteed input and consistent hardware at scale, but it doesn't work the same way for computer games. Everyone's computer is different. If you approach games with the assumption the hardware will just work, and if it doesn't, well, you need to upgrade, that's a slippery slope we're now all comfortably at the bottom at here in 2024, where optimization is secondary to content. But in the early thousands, I can imagine making and using the diesel engine was pretty intoxicating. Going from working on Amiga mods to creating your own tools to develop games in. The end result not working quite right is superseded by the ecstasy of getting it working at all. And Ballistics was an impressive thing to get working at all. Ulf Andersson calls it the best thing Grin made for a long time. And unfortunately, he was probably right. Because what followed was a string of games that were received fine, just fine. Bandits Phoenix Rising looks fun to me, but apparently the controls were stiff and the car combat genre was already getting a little stale by 2003. An out-of-left-field action game that satisfies your inner Mel Gibson. What? Let that internal motherfucker want for more! Don't feed him! At this point, Grin themselves are done with car stuff for a while. It's the mid-thousands. Racing games are gonna shift into a lower gear for a bit, and the Andersons could see the writing projected on the wall with pre-baked lighting and a grainy pixel filter. First-person shooters. Now that genre is truly the Fortnite of video games, but with guns! Plenty of hit shooters came out of this era. Complex physics interactions are tricky, but bullets? Firing arms? They already worked all that out for Phoenix Rising. Diesel was malleable enough to convert to a shooty game engine, sure.
You know, you don't turn down Tom Clancy.
Grin partnered with Ubisoft for Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 1 and 2 in 06 and 07 respectively. Specifically, the PC versions, as every release of these games across different hardware is notably changed. Sometimes there's a third-person mode, sometimes there are solo missions. The levels vary, there's more or less of them, your squad size is bigger or smaller based on the system's capability. They're not entirely different games, just different iterations on the same idea made to market quickly. The PC ports they made aren't available on Steam anymore for some reason, but thankfully I already owned Graw 2. It was actually the first game from Grin I ever purchased, years before Payday. I only played it for like an hour though, because it was overwhelmingly tactical and a bit buggy, ran like shit and crashed a lot. I thought I was gonna like it when I purchased it, but it's clear these days that I'm just not the market for these kind of games. I like twitch shooters with fast and complex movement. Slower, meticulous shooters going room by room like this, I'd rather that be a competitive multiplayer game. But I gave the game an honest effort to get some footage this time around, and this might be starting to look a little familiar to Payday fans. Beyond just being a shooter, the styles of objectives, scenario crafting, aesthetic, animations, it's all starting to come together. You're a tight-knit squad of fighters with fun guns and special equipment, getting orders from the radio, fighting against an opposing force to secure X or defend Y. No, I'm not claiming that this is just Payday but with war crimes, we aren't at that game yet. Graw was absolutely its own thing, a fairly popular thing too. What I'm saying is the design sensibilities the folks at Grin formed here would be carried forward into their future projects. Now, aside from Ubisoft and Grin, there was another even smaller studio subcontracted to work on these games, one going by Northplay. But in 2008, they had gone under and re-emerged as Fat Shark. Some of you just perked up, oh, I heard of that one! Bo Anderson helped Fat Shark get started. He made some connections for them, let them use the diesel engine. Grin had a stake in their success. Literally. The new studio had Niklas Gray and Tobias Persson leading development, who both worked on the diesel engine before. They made a couple titles in it, but as time passed, they wanted, I'd argue needed, their own engine. Using Lua, they built BitSquid. I'd call it something of a spiritual successor to Diesel, but it's not the same software. It's still that by devs for devs kind of mentality. However, this quote from Fat Shark CEO Martin Vallund, one of the original guys at Northplay, really stands out to me. We knew it was important to develop the engine close to a game developer, but still with integrity, so it didn't get caught up in game releases and forced into bad, short-sighted decisions. You don't say. Later, BitSquid was bought out and remastered into Autodesk Stingray, and versions of this engine were used to make Warhammer Vermintide and Darktide, and then it was quietly discontinued in 2018. and yet the Swedish 4-player co-op market couldn't help itself, so Helldivers 2 had to go and drag it back from the dead to disappoint a new generation of mid-tier hardware owners. Sorry, I'm jumping the timeline again. Where was I? It's 2008, and the Diesel engine makes platformers now. Capcom saw Grin's Graw and smiled right back, way back to the arcades and NES for a remaster of a classic. This game was Simon Viklund's baby, as he puts it. And he's not just doing music, although it's some of his best work at Grin. Simon was the game's designer, and his brother Victor was a level designer. Still an Anderson's game, it's still Grin, but the Viklunds in particular were really excited to get this right. And they nailed it. This review of Bionic Commando Rearmed is from 2008 and was absolutely heaping praise.
And without question, it is the best game to appear on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network.
Though critics weren't as enthusiastic about the eventual sequel, which started development under Grin, but would later be handed off to Fat Shark. Brought them up for a reason. On that note, do you want to know what people's biggest criticism about both Bionic Commando games were? They were buggy, ran like shit, and crashed a lot. These days, it takes a lot of effort to get the first one to launch at all. See now why Fat Shark were so eager to make their own engine, huh? It's such a devil's bargain to have tools which cater so heavily to the conceptualization phase and then falter on the final performance. You're setting your developers up for public embarrassment. Even if the game is good, if people can't launch it, they can't fucking play it. But for players on consistent console hardware or PC owners with the right combination of tech, $10 to $15 for these games was a pretty fair price, especially at the time. Those final price points were decided upon by a Capcom-run community poll, apparently. Fits right in with Grin's communal-style approach. The reviews tell me that BCR is a classic, but BCR 2 is just a cheap replica. It's not remaking anything, it's just more Bionic Commando, but worse. Apparently the levels were weaker too.
When I would finish a level, I didn't think, wow, that was awesome. It was more of, well, I just played a level in a video game.
Great fucking analysis, IGN. Really cracked the case on that one. They've always been like this, huh? The thing they were trying to say is unmemorable level design, which is a valid complaint. But maybe that's because the sequel didn't have decades of precedent with which to compare. Now that said, the Viklunds didn't get to work on the sequel as much as Simon would have liked. And there was another level designer that was on Rearmed but didn't come back for Rearmed 2. That's a guy named Ilya Petrusic, hailing from Bosnia. Maybe he was the difference maker in design. We should keep an eye on the guy. Let's see, I think that's it for the Bionic Commando game. Oh, wait. Bionic Commando 2009. A third-person platformer, what? I don't think I've ever heard of this.
I'll always be by your side.
Oh, Wife Arm game, right! The worst final act plot twist in gaming history, though playing the game certainly isn't how most people found out. It turns out the whole time you're swinging around and punching bad guys, your cool robot arm was actually possessed by the soul of your missing wife.
What happened to Emily? It doesn't matter.
I never left, Nathan. It's you who was lost. I'll always be by your side.
What?
Tech needs a soul to power it, and they had one left over in the fridge. Matter of fact, apparently Emily's body is in cryostasis. They literally fridge her to advance the plot and then turn her into an object to help the man. Oh wow, I could go on about this, but plenty of other YouTubers have done that before me. Any creative gameplay within Bionic Commando 09 is trapped behind a layer of dumb, gritty, dude bro adrenaline trying to chase the aesthetics of other titles of the moment. With Grin's special blend of Eurojank and misogyny imbibed like a fucking spouse. I completely forgot this was a Bionic Commando game, despite that literally being its name. It existed entirely in my memory as Wife Arm game, all the memes about White Dread's dead wife being jacked into swing. Word is that Grin ran their own little community poll to design the protagonist's look, so we can blame the era for that a little bit. But your wife's consciousness being trapped in your arm the whole time? This fucking fetish thing? Because let's be honest, what else could this have been? That specific plot beat was Grin's idea. And they really thought it was a good one. They had to press KJ Inafune to let them army wife his franchise, and eventually he gave up and went, whatever, do what you want. Bionic Commando flopped so hard that Capcom was spooked off of letting any international studio use their old IPs for a while, just the safely established ones. And Grin became known as that studio to those in the loop at the Japanese dev scene. 2009 was a busy year, huh? What else were Grin up to? Oh, shovelware movie tie-in games, great! They dropped all this shit in the span of a couple of months. More games more quickly indeed, Christ! If there's one thing that Bo is genuinely great at, it's schmoozing up to IP holders. Something his brother Ulf's decidedly not a fan of. Quote, "Ask me again in 10 years and maybe I'll have changed my mind, but I think licenses are such a limiting thing. You think the Terminator license is going to be great, but then we had like 5 months to build that game." Later in the interview with NME, he got more candid. There was a financial crash in 2008, but there was also the problem of Terminator being quite shitty and Wanted being quite shitty and Bionic Commando being quite shitty. It doesn't help. You know, I initially read that quote before I remembered BC 2009 existed, so I thought he was talking about Rearmed. And I went, oh come on, that game was fine. But yeah, Rad Spencer and the Lady Limb were, in fact, quite shitty. As were these movie games, short little forgettable sideswipes that hit on nominal notes of their properties. Games that probably could have been interesting if any one of them was Grin's main focus. This is what happens when you tell 3 different IP holders, yeah, we can definitely hit that deadline, at the same time. All of these titles have their fans, and good for them. Apparently the swinging in 09 feels really good once you get the hang of it. But those fans deserved better. Those developers deserved better. Instead of quick surface level takes on neat ideas meant to hit a content unit deadline. Games that are buggy, run like shit, and crash a lot. That's not an incidental complaint. This shit matters. The flow state players enter when they're really engaging with a game can so easily be interrupted by a character folding in on themselves, a nasty lag spike, or the software encountering an error and shutting down in a panic. Optimization is important. It should not be considered optional. It is core to the final player's experience. If the average PC owner can't run the game on launch, and then time passes and they still can't on modern hardware because the architecture is too archaic, why are you making PC games at all? Because you can ship them faster, that's fucking why. Grin wanted more games. Bo, specifically, wanted more games. Their big smiling logo would gain an extra gold tooth for every product they released. The quantity was intended from the outset. Diesel does platformers, racing games, third and first person shooters. What else can it do? A Strider game? A Streets of Rage game? A Final fucking Fantasy game? You'll never walk out of a pitch meeting empty-handed if you're willing to bluster about your capabilities. If you assume your developers will just figure it out, if you don't care how many partner studios and potential players you've alienated. Because Diesel doesn't do any of this shit. Not by default. Human beings still have to figure out how to make it work. Build from base components, spend endless weeks grinding away at tech problems for something that can only be as passionate as 6 months and some shitty movies allow. But that's the kind of nuance you lose if you let the business side seep into every aspect of game design. To a developer, the final result is the game. To a publisher, the final result is the sales. Ulf was amped up about working on a Final Fantasy XII spin-off, had all kinds of ideas for the story plotted out. Bo was confident about all these new partnerships he was building, and the money that would surely follow. Bo's money didn't come through, and Ulf's project got cancelled, as did everything else. Neither of the Andersons took this well, calling it a betrayal. Now, with hindsight these days, Ulf chalks Project Fortress's failure up to communication issues between Square Enix in Japan and Grin in Stockholm. I, however, have a different theory. Would you want to keep working with the Wife Arm guys? Who just got off of being so horny they damaged Capcom's international brand? Capcom? Squeenix approached Grin about making a spin-off in 08. 09 comes around and they pump out Wife Arm, Unwanted, and Terminator Salvation, really the Terminator Salvation of games. It doesn't matter how good the developmental screenshots you send along look if you've lost people's trust like that. After a couple months, Square Enix stopped sending checks and abandoned the pursuit. To them, Grin was just another subcontractor, and an underperforming one at that. Grin got ghosted. It's not complicated, but it certainly hurts. So, after developing games for over 10 years, your last 3 titles flopped, and your next one loses support and funding, what do? Well, in Sweden, in the thousands, you give up and declare bankruptcy. With how much debt they were in, legally, they didn't have a choice. If you tie up all of your revenue from the previous game into scooping up IPs for the next one, any single project going wrong, let alone 3, makes it all come crashing down. When the funny money goes, the Andersons' Grin follows. In a departing letter, they lamented not being able to make their masterpiece, thanked everybody and their mother, literally, and signed off with, "Be right back, away from keyboard." Grin had been slowly shedding talent leading up to this. Some joined up with Fat Shark, who would go on to see success with their Vermintide series. They even gave a special thanks to the brothers in the credits. Well, just to Ulf, actually. Some other Grin folks went on to start Outbreak Games with a focus on mobile. They still seem to be around, maybe. And one of the brothers, and Simon Viklund too. They had their diesel engine, their code, and developers still looking for work. Grin might have been killed, but they got over it.
We did a bunch of games, and then most of them sucked, so we went bankrupt.
We can't use Stone Cold. There is a American wrestler.
And now, the big deal co-op horde shooter of the era, Left 4 Dead. Over in America, Turtle Rock Studios and Valve worked together to create an incredible hit. I'd argue the defining cooperative game of the late decade. 4 survivors use their guns and grenades to fight their way past waves of zombies, some with special powers to survive and escape the city. I made a video all about that and what Turtle Rock would go on to do, linked above and below. Just 1 year after Left 4 Dead, as the Grin dies, Valve alone would release Left 4 Dead 2. A bit early for a sequel, but apparently the biggest reasons for this were as follows. Left 4 Dead was buggy, ran like shit, and crashed a lot. Lest we forget, jank is by no means exclusive to the Euro scene. If a game is good enough, players will put up with some bullshit to play. But what about updates? Maybe even some downloadable content? Extra levels as free or paid DLC were brute forcing their way into the market by this point. But if your game is built on code so spaghettified that you have to load multiple copies of the map at the same time just so players don't randomly despawn, going back to add more maps is obnoxious as fuck. To quote developer Chet Falizek, Left 4 Dead was such a broken thing that nobody wanted to touch it. That game was iterated so quickly that if it meant breaking something horrible where you had to load a map 2 or 3 times but you could playtest it today, we did it. That meant at some point you had to pay for that debt. He closes that thought out rather candidly. When people kill themselves to ship a game, you don't really want to say that there were problems with it. Left 4 Dead's 1 and 2 were some of the most influential games being played in 2009. And in summer of that year over in Stockholm, from Grin's ashes, a new company was born. SLG Everscreen AB. Kind of a lengthy name, so for all public-facing purposes, they go by Overkill. No licensed IPs, no other projects to worry about, just a couple of guys with a decade of experience. Ulf, Bo, Simon, some of their friends, and the diesel engine.
And we borrowed a basement as our office.
Yeah, we borrowed it from Fat Shark.
Yeah, Fat Shark. Yeah, we went from 250 people.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, starting over at, we were 8.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys who stuck around is Martin Varn, the guy who knew the diesel engine inside and out. Linus Anderberg and Thomas Slavsbayik stayed on, an animator and artist respectively, whose work on Grin's last couple of flops wasn't really the issue. There's some other people I could list who aren't part of the story I'm telling here, but we got level designers Joachim Skoglund and Ilya Petrisik. Remember him?
Me and a guy called Ilya.
He decided to tag along. Oh, and he had a friend who was curious about game development and offered to help out.
Hey, Heisters.
Of course I wasn't gonna forget Almir. Shame on you if you thought otherwise. Almir Listo has a big personality. Or, if nothing else, he projects one. He's all smiles and cheers and cracks jokes at his own expense. Really, it's hard to find footage where he's not smiling. Not impossible, mind you, but he honestly seems like just a swell guy. He went to school with Ilya and his brother Nikisha and got into games to have fun, help out, and make people happy. Developers, players, just people in general. I'm certainly glad he found this outlet, because as a kid, his first idea was to join the police. No shade though, a lot of us have a phase where we think cops are cool. Then you get older, get wiser, see the world for how it really is, and conclude that the problem with Left 4 Dead was that you couldn't shoot enough fucking cops! Let me start out by saying, because I talk a lot of shit, Payday the Heist isn't perfect, but it's a damn good game. It leans into every positive aspect of Grin's old developmental style, now with years of experience. Payday was the result of an Overkill office brainstorming session. They said to themselves, we like co-op games, and we like American crime movies. What if there was a co-op game where you played American crime movies? I'm not exaggerating, they're very candid about this.
It's all about the
epic Hollywood moments that you recall from heist movies such as Heat and Point Break.
So we sat down and basically went like, what do we want to make? And since we're all like cooperative gamers and we love heist movies, always done, you know, and Heat is the best one. And we also love the, you know, the intro sequence to Batman, which I mean you can tell we do.
See? Simon and Ulf don't mind the comparison. It's intentional. There's at least one non-cinematic source that, while I can't find it written down anywhere, I'm confident in saying is part of Payday's DNA. The complete Ice-T discography.
Now, I'm gonna talk to you guys over there.
Including the Gears of War stuff Body Count released that very year. Simon named one of the game's expansion tracks Home Invasion, for fuck's sake. If they hadn't heard of the guy before making this game, which I'm actually not convinced Allmere did, they must have at least listened to Cop Killer, right? And either way, the rapper sure made himself known when he tweeted about playing Payday 2, and then eventually, yes, that is him in Payday 3. Ice-T really hit these fellas' lives like a Mack truck, huh? Tracy Marrow says he robbed real jewelry stores and banks, and these Swedish software developers were so impressed they made a Left 4 Dead about it. But like, that's fine. I hope you don't take my ribbing on the adults that shaped my teenage years as hate. All I'm saying is, even the developers agree that the initial spark of Payday ain't very deep. Alpha male adrenaline rush heist flicks with the latest formula in co-op game design. So anything new, original brought to this IP is building off a thin layer of late 80s to late thousands crime media. An authentic appreciation, but still an approximation. The specifics became incidental. The narrative is purposefully loose. While the heists are presumed to happen in linear order, they're more akin to Days in the Life of a Heister, a crime anthology series. The heist ran the gambit on these set pieces: bank robbery, gold shipment, drug stash, prison break, counterfeit plates, diamonds. Each map you are stealing or securing at least one thing which is unique, even if the mechanical gameplay interactions themselves aren't. So much of what makes Payday the Heist work is presentation. They only had so few assets to work with, but when those assets are presented differently, they come across as new. You can reuse the gas can asset as thermite for the vault if you just call it thermite and commit hard enough in universe. Moving bags of money from the bank and bags of gold from the armored transport are both really just holding a button while staring at a gym bag, but the difference of having to set down each bag of gold to go back for another makes that loot seem heavier. The very pacing of the heist makes it feel like the gold weighs more. Escort missions where you shout at an NPC to push ahead are repetitive, but the player's perceived relationship to that mission can be altered. Matt tried to fuck you over. You have to run and fight through some of the most difficult sections in the game to catch him, all the while stewing on how he's a piece of shit traitor. Screaming at him to move is satisfying after all the effort getting there. Meanwhile, the prisoner you break free is mission critical, so you're shouting at him to get down and move faster so he doesn't get himself killed. What's his name again? Oh wow, they really called him that, huh?
Not the preferred nomenclature.
Yeah, we gotta remember that this game was made by a group of white Swedish dudes in 2011. Dudes who, when told by playtesters that naming your black character Chains might come off as racist, said, really? Why? Dudes who, when they were playing around with the idea of making a Payday movie, let this interview get filmed at their studios.
And we're at Overkill Studios in Stockholm, home of Payday the Heist.
I've been there.
But
Now it's done.
yeah.
It's really cool.
I think that's mine though, but
Mine looks better. If I was lesbian, I would probably be with her. What?
Yo,
Yo, what's up?
I'm modeling a giant penis. You want to see?
Yeah, please, show us.
Oh, you know, you're too young for that.
Yeah. Thankfully, Payday doesn't have any robot hands, so all of these women's souls are safe. Overkill did not approve of this ad spot for creation or release, and pretty quickly disavowed it, but given what Bo would go on to do, I'm not surprised they let the concept get this far before the public found out. Look, Payday the Heist hasn't aged great in some ways, but neither has 2010's gaming culture in general. Ulf is the game's lead designer, and in this interview, he's trying to make a point about contrasting team-based PvP FPSs with co-op shooters that promote teamwork, in hopes that more players can enjoy the genre together.
We want it to be a cooperative experience. We think that the best cooperative games is where you can't sort of ruin it for each other. Focus on just you know, playing it together and have fun.
Unfortunately, it was 2011 and Ulf was a gamer, so he said it like this.
Yeah, you always get, you know, raped online by somebody, and in that sense.
Team-based.
Yeah.
Oof, Ulf. he was pretty bad at interviews. What he was getting at was that FPSs of the era that had bombastic swearing and endless violence were usually either single-player campaigns or player versus player Call of Duty likes. If a game was willing to be, frankly, offensive counterculture, it was also commonplace for it to insult its players who weren't dominating the competition. For there to be winners, there had to be losers, a public scoreboard to be judged by. Overkill wanted a gritty, edgy adrenaline rush where players are looking out for one another, trying to actively help each other. A game where your friend can kill steal from you and it would be acceptable to respond, "Great shot, asshole," and maybe that was needed. Left 4 Dead was all about co-op, but Valve's charming writing style and old-school gunplay wasn't for everybody. The way they conceptualized co-op could even feel to some a little condescending. Being stopped to be healed up forcefully is a little irritating, innit? But throwing a medic back down for anyone who needs it is easier. It's the difference between offering one single person out of a crowd a drink or just throwing a 24 on the table. One of them could be a social pressure, the other is a party. And when this game hit right, when you had a crew who had a grasp on the basics, it satisfied like nothing else. Left 4 Dead's maps were pretty good, if quite linear, but Payday the Heist's maps are set pieces meant to be taken in. Even through the dated graphics, the scale and color grade of Green Bridge are baked into my brain. And you can pick from a selection of different movie-inspired color filters to get the mood just right. The music syncs to the action, it picks up when the police are assaulting you, and then pulls back when they're regrouping. If you let yourself sink into it, Payday the Heist can really feel like a movie. A cliched, low-budget action movie. This game was made for barely any cash at all. Sony agreed to do publishing for the PS3, but for the most part, Overkill had to scrape by repurposing assets left over from their previous games. They learned to make helicopters, planes, military-grade tactical gear, and all the associated animations. Better put all that to good use. And despite the limitation, Payday is famous for its randomly generated events. Parts of heists which change a little every time you play. Sometimes it's as small as a computer being in a different place. Other times, the entire focus of combat will shift to a different part of the map based on the way the cookie crumbles. Do you realize how confident you have to be in your core game loop to commit development time to creating complex scenarios which need voice acting, audio engineering, and custom assets, to then only let those events occur maybe 1 out of every 10 times you play the level? Also, players can have the reaction, "Whoa, that didn't happen last time! Shit, what do we do now?" I actually had that happen myself while getting footage of the RNG. I didn't know the bank guards could cuff you, or if I did, I forgot, but I've played this game for over a decade and saw something that never happened to me before. If you're willing to commit that many resources to events so unlikely to be seen, it means that you're trusting players will like the game so much that they'll stick around. You're counting on them to replay the same levels over and over. The progression is paced around it. Weapons and upgrades are unlocked not by beating heists, but by getting cash as experience by doing the same hit time after time. And this is really important. You think people would be willing to do that if the music wasn't so good? If you had to listen to the same butt rock or boring dubstep every mission, would you keep replaying? And yet, if you've ever tried playing Payday with the music off, you're still on that heat shit, the scoreless shootout. The guns are loud, poppy, click and clack in ways that make their own rhythm. But really, Simon's tunes are an important part of the experience. Heat Street just doesn't hit right without Double Cross and that kick-ass bass line. If I keep gushing about the soundtrack, I'll never stop, but the action being timed to the beat really is part of what makes this game work. It makes the entire movie-like heist feel reactive to you. Though I should note, the original main menu theme was composed by the game's art director, Robert F. Blom, lead singer of former punk band Concrete Society. He also lent his likeness to one of the heisters, Hoxton. In fact, wherever possible, Payday the Heist uses the people they have on hand to fill out the cast. Famously, Simon Viklund voices your man in the van who gives you direction over comms, Bane. But there he is as a civvy too.
Find the bank manager, then tie him down or shoot him and you'll get the key card.
Bo Anderson lends his likeness to the guy Bane said to tie down her shoe.
Okay.
And Ulf plays Wolf, a former software developer who went crazy and started robbing banks. When casting for this game, Ulf and Simon got to play the protagonists, and Bo got to play the bank manager. It's interesting to cast one brother as the bank robber and the other as the greedy executive. The bank's, well, publisher.
Okay, let's roll.
You can imagine the Andersons were feeling particularly spiteful about greedy executives and publishers, so all this fuck the rich get paid energy was probably pretty cathartic too.
How Wolf really ended up in the game is we would record placeholder voices, and it turned out that Ulf has a absolutely phenomenal scream.
You gotta help me!
You can really hear Ulf trying to push his range in this unbroken take left over in the game files. Shoutouts to the cutting room floor for keeping LOL Noob 1's work archived.
You guys got my back? You got my back, guys? You got my back, guys? You guys watch...
Has the same energy as when I tried to add more bravado to my voice in old videos.
Watch my back! Watch me back! Guys!
The argument that got me over to doing it was basically if Simon was doing the
Fantastic! Great job!
and we had at least one from our team, but one character being played, we could always like do fillers and quick pickups.
So I didn't want to use my normal voice. I went up here and I added a little bit of like I hate doing the voice.
Overkill were just using whatever humans were on standby that could look the part, sound believable, and this approach has its advantages. When you're putting an update together, you already got the guys in the studio. You can record at any time, take pictures of each other holding prop pistols as promo pieces. If you're able to handle the workload all yourself, it's a lot cheaper than paying a whole nother human to voice your mission planner or your psycho killer. Assuming those developers stick around, of course.
I hate doing the voice.
Payday the Heist didn't exactly get rave reviews at launch. However, it cost $20 American. At that price for a direct download title with a confident identity and solid loop, yeah, it did pretty well. For a game made in a little under 2 years from a studio making their re-debut, Payday did all right. It sold at least 700,000 copies in its first year, with additional sales going to its big paid DLC, the Wolf Pack. Convenient, frame it around the guy who has to be at work anyways. Were Payday a PvP game, this DLC would surely be called Pay to Win. And people certainly did that anyways. Yeah, the sentries, AK, extra skills, all that's fine, but the grenade launcher was the really big deal. The highest difficulties in Payday the Heist are better faced with a puff. But it's not just weapons. 2 whole-ass maps were added for this expansion, which cost half the game's base price at $10. Only the lobby leader needed to own the DLC to host a public match their friends or randoms could jump into, and enjoy heists for a DLC they don't own themselves. This factor alone is what outweighed this DLC's acceptability versus annoyance. Sure, asking people to pay for post-launch content was tougher in 2012 before that became the norm, but when most games cost $60, paying $20 for the base game and $10 to be the generous host for game night, showing off your fancy gadgets as your friends thank you for the chance to play undercover, now that's a value proposition. This was actually my first touchpoint to Payday, this apartment building heist where you beat the shit out of the taxman, played by Almir Listo. I first discovered this game as a teenager by watching videos from All Sham No Wow. Hope he didn't turn out weird. Watched him play undercover, but he was solo so he didn't finish it.
No way! That was so close!
I looked up a playthrough because I wanted to know how the heist ends, and the thing that convinced me to buy the game wasn't shooting cops, wasn't beating up on Almir.
Don't hear me! Okay.
It was this dumbass little parkour jump. I loved roof hopping as a kid. It was basically all we had to do in our crappy little city. So the aesthetic of abandoned building rooftops and dangerous gaps, it spoke to me. Paired with my related disdain for the cops, I found myself a new special interest and bought a copy. Bought copies for my friends, made them get involved. Which was a bit of a tough ask at the time because I got really into Payday the Heist after the sequel had already come out. Granted, not long after, Payday 2 hadn't gotten many updates, not yet, but I knew my computer's cheap-ass AMD Radeon card couldn't handle a modern release of 2013, so I opted for the first entry, assuming it would run better. Kinda did. Okay, it was buggy, ran like shit and crashed a lot, but you know all that by now. Some of Payday the Heist's very first updates fixed a laundry list of issues, including addressing performance on older hardware. But the whole thing was held up by needing to create new patching infrastructure so the game's file size wouldn't blow out of proportion. All that technical debt catches up to you real quick when your co-op game is constantly interrupted by lobby disconnects and desynchronized player states. Actually, we've got to talk about that. The peer-to-peer system, or sort of a hybrid listen server system. There are so many forum pages full of debate about what to call this architecture, and the community has settled on peer-to-peer. So if you do netcode for a living, everything I'm about to say is gonna sound like a slur. Sorry. When playing a multiplayer game online, a computer somewhere needs to host the game. Duh, yeah, that makes sense. But running a game is a bit taxing on a system, as anyone who's ever had to close background applications to get their frame rate back up would know. But it's one thing to run an instance of a game locally, only expecting local input from your computer. It's much more complicated to then ask for updates from the 3 other players' computers several times a second to process that and then send new data back to their systems. Aside from just internet connection speed, you're now not only asking your rig to run the game, but to keep track of positions, kills, interactions, health, everything your teammates do, which affects the game state. If your hardware can't process all those packets of information fast enough, or there's some kind of interruption, the game will stall to catch up. And that stalling manifests itself as the game running slower in a couple different ways. Not just frame rate, but in-game mission objectives which normally play back-to-back will instead have moments of delay in between. Fewer enemies will appear on the map because your hardware hasn't gotten done processing the last wave you beat back. On your teammates' end, they'll see cops and robbers alike flying all over the map as their client tries to catch up. Assuming the host player's hardware and internet connection are good, the game should run fine, but all it takes is the host to Alt-Tab to check their DMs and the whole game goes to shit. Most, if not all of this load, has to be put on the CPU, your processor. For a game engine meant to showcase the capabilities of GPU tech, specifically decade-old stuff at that, Diesel is asking a lot. For the user to be both client and listen server host, they need more than just a nice graphics card, they need an all-around high-end computer. Why take this approach at all? Well, because generally speaking, the alternative is the studio has to host dedicated servers. Instead of burdening any of the players with hosting a server, a series of servers are in a warehouse somewhere, ideally multiple ones around the world, which can be connected to remotely. These servers exist only to run the game's multiplayer functionality, so they're built to spec and don't have to worry that much about client-side fuckery. And sure, the host no longer has perfect ping because their connection isn't purely local, but every player in the lobby getting a consistent experience is very important. It's so frustrating to tell someone, shoot that guy, and have them answer, who? The guy in front of you, except he's probably not there on your screen, is he? Servers standardize this behavior, but they do come at a cost. Literally, they're expensive as fuck to run. A 24/7 powerhouse electrical box getting ideally constant updates from players? If you're hosting them yourself, that's a lot of maintenance. If you're paying someone else to host them, that's a perpetual price tag. And in the early 2010s, Overkill couldn't afford that. So they trusted users and hardware to be up to the task. PlayStation 3 version had constant connection problems, by the way. Needing hardware to run the game as intended might have been part of why the PC player base is the one that took off. That and modding. If any of this footage looks a bit different than how you remember, I've got the game modded out. Another advantage of players hosting client-side. Of course, that lets cheaters get into the mix, but it also allows for performance patches. Tweaks to get the game to run at acceptable frame rates by doing things like lowering shadow LODs past their usual minimum, or disabling the inefficient dynamic lights altogether on No Mercy. What a clever business move that heist was, by the way, and I mean it. Crossovers may suck the life out of devs who don't want to make an advertisement for someone else's work, but in a game so confidently riffing on extant media, this fits right in. And Valve were happy to play along, lending their IPs to anyone who promised more traffic to Steam. Getting made fun of for leaning a bit hard on Left 4 Dead's formula? Lean harder, all the way into it. Tell gamers it's okay to be inspired by something and that you're proud to now be a part of it. And Simon's techno track ties this whole thing together. Just as Gunmetal Grey was confidently riffing on the Heat soundtrack, Code Silver is using Left 4 Dead soundprint, or at least something similar. I don't think he was literally sampling sounds from other games and movies, though it'd be fine if he did, that's what sampling is, but rather he tries to invoke those sounds. Overkill made the comparisons to Left 4 Dead work for them as promotion. They went all the way in on this. Masks, a custom zombie-themed menu, stealing blood from an intensive care unit to sell to a guy who wants to start the zombie apocalypse. I feel like the pitch meeting for this crossover event went, okay, what can we steal in a hospital? And someone replies, oh, blood! A little too quickly. However you may feel about these guys, Bo's ability to establish relationships with important players like Valve, Wolf's directed vision on the kind of co-op experience he sees as satisfying, and Simon's voice and soundscape all came together with Ilya and Ko's carefully crafted levels, programmers like Varn and Almir Listo's vibes, built up with the effort and encouragement of plenty of other names I've failed to mention. working with little but scraps in an old engine, they made a fun fucking video game. Even if it might have strained their personal relationships with each other.
At that point, obviously, we didn't know that it was going to be a rather popular game and that it would be a sequel.
You see, attaching your livelihood to your friend's ability to grind only lasts as long as you're all sharing passion for the same creative vision, as long as the money keeps coming in, which leads to a toxic incentive set. When the game is successful, you and your friends are happy. When the business takes a turn, so do the friendships. It has the same energy as early YouTube-era sketch comedy. A bunch of friends of varying backgrounds come together to make something imperfectly new on a medium that's not yet gotten as big as it's going to. And then as they get more successful, they have to start charting all the shortcuts they took. Decide who really owns this brand now that it's gone mainstream. Ulf had to work with programmers on patches to fix bugs found in cobbled-together code so players could actually finish heists without crashing. Bo was answering questions on the regular in the forums, which he himself was a moderator for. Simon's music career was getting publishing handled through Overkill, meaning his own work was technically company property. So long as everybody can agree on the creative vision on which way to direct the company going forward, then this is all fine, right? But it gets harder and harder to make decisions based on your friendships for the game about making money when the company still isn't turning a profit. Now, we're however many minutes into this video, and I'm still talking about the first Payday game and Overkill, which must seem a little odd to those only familiar with Payday 3, as the studio they know as the Payday people isn't called Overkill. See, there's another Swedish tech-centric game studio from the 90s I haven't talked about yet, and really, their story is so similar to Grin's that it would be repetitive to rehash all of it. So I'll do my best to hit the spark notes. Starbreeze is a studio with more ups and downs than Fenty-laced perks. It is a mess of a fucking company. And the fact that they still exist can only be due to some satanic pact which mandates every time they should have been killed, another Swedish game studio is sacrificed in their place. These guys ran the gambit on overinvestment in the wrong places, overpromising the license holders technical issues from their in-house engine and creating splinter studios every time they nearly collapsed. But rather than file for bankruptcy, if a Starbreeze launch went over too poorly, they'd merge with another floundering studio, combine assets, and try again. Starbreeze was founded by programmer and musician Magnus Hogdahl. Old heads in the demo scene might remember him as Vogue, a member of Triton. He's been called a genius designer and compared to John Carmack, although that might be an insult depending on who you ask. Magnus built a couple different engines for Starbreeze over the years, and across the 2000s they released a series of games with reviews and returns about on par with Grin's collection. Not that these games are all bad, but none of them were standout. Until, surprisingly, their own movie tie-in critical success, Chronicles of Riddick, was pretty good apparently. Never got a chance to try it myself.
There was an extra sort of visual finesse to what Starbreeze had done.
No, not you. Shut the fuck up. But it was a developmental nightmare, with people getting fired left and right during its creation and a vindictive higher-up trying to kill the game off for their own ego. The lack of revenue to show for Starbreeze's success is attributed to greedy license holders and publishers screwing the little guy over. And while I'm sure some of that is bluster, even studios making consistently well-received games get fucked over all the time. Grin very well might have gone under even if their last 3 games were any good. That's why they went on to make Overkill and Payday. Explicitly, they wanted their own IP. And around the same time that was happening, Starbreeze was fishing for their next big hit. Not with a new IP, but with a reboot of Peter Molyneux's 1993 isometric strategy game Syndicate. If you remember playing this at the time, then congratulations, you've officially made it to old age. Don't get me wrong, it was a hit in the 90s, but it just didn't have the reach to bring back in 2012, especially when creative differences between the publisher and the devs infect the whole project. Reminds me of another ill-fated reboot of a classic video game with a celebrity-lined cast from a couple years before. Starbreeze went bigger on their polls than Grin though. Brian Cox, Rosario Dawson, if they thought a celebrity might say yes, they'd find the money. Syndicate got a bunch of reworks during development. Do we want to be more like Fallout or Fear, Mass Effect or Deus Ex? It was such a mess that Magnus had had enough and left before the game was finished, taking a bunch of employees with him. Together they made their own studio, Machine Games, Games, and went on to see incredible success with their Wolfenstein franchise reboot. They're getting back into making movie tie-in games again though, so we'll see. It's been argued before that the real Starbreeze is Machine Games, and that the company still called Starbreeze is, well, we'll get there. But in 2012, with their lead engineer gone and several employees laid off, Starbreeze got themselves a new CEO, Mikael Nermak. Now, he's passed on since, cancer, age 50. Mikael is fondly remembered. Everything I've read about him, he seems like a really kind, gentle man. May he rest in peace. I'm not gonna sit here and crack jokes about the guy. Besides, I don't think that'd be justified, as under his leadership, Starbreeze took up a bold experimental strategy. The future of gaming is in AAA digital downloads. Saying that these days seems obvious now, right? It's so obvious it's even weird to say. Studios out here claiming they're quadruple A, and aren't all games digital download anyways? But not back then. Even with Valve picking up pace in the PC marketplace, it was still common for so-called AAA games to release on disc only for PC, if they had a PC version at all. The last gasps of disc-based computer games were punctuated by a scramble for every studio to make their own exclusive digital distribution platforms. So Mikael was right on the money, and was ready to position Starbreeze to take over the emergent PC-prioritized, hell, PC proprietary market. All they needed to do was buy another studio, ideally one with some big project already in the works that would pay back the debt they'd have to go into to finish it. Developers who knew what it was like to be jerked around by IP holders, who'd be willing to work around the clock to create something original, to make their Payday 2. In 2012, Starbreeze buys Overkill. Or it could be argued, Overkill took Starbreeze over. Both companies were in financial ruin, so how exactly did this happen? Well, essentially, Starbreeze offers to buy Overkill with some capital, but mainly shares in itself. A financial stake in their own success. Shares which could theoretically skyrocket in value were these studios to work together to get themselves a hit. But since Starbreeze's shares were essentially worthless circa 2012, they had to give out a bunch of them to get Overkill to agree. So much so that Viklund and the Andersons effectively became majority shareholders of the combined company overnight. Were it not for inking this deal, neither of these companies would have lived to see 2013. But what a fucking gamble to take, right? Starbreeze legitimately saw so much potential in Overkill that they were willing to become Overkill. But they weren't willing to give up the name. If asked who had more clout at the time, I honestly think it would be a tie. Starbreeze had spent years burning goodwill, and Overkill had only just gotten started. I think that paradigm went into the decision to keep both names around for as long as they did, even combining their logos for a time. In effect, Overkill just became a name for a specific team of Starbreeze employees. It was never the studio's real name anyways. So there we have Overkill Starbreeze, now sharing a studio in Stockholm. What'd the employees get up to? Well, the folks coming from Starbreeze got to show investors they're still making moves while they finish up work on their upcoming puzzle adventure game, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
And you're also sort of merging with Overkill. We decided to focus on the Payday franchise, and right now we do it in Payday after we finish Brothers. So the team here in Uppsala is going to finish Brothers, and then we're moving the whole production to Stockholm, to one studio. We're focusing on the Payday franchise.
And for our own brothers, the Andersons, Simeland? Who's Simeland? The Andersons, Simon, and all the Overkill guys, they secured some funding and support to finish up the Wolfpack DLC and start working in earnest on their next project. Now, this merger was finalized right around the time the big Payday the Heist secret was playing out. This whole affair was buck wild. It was an ARG, alternate reality game. A big community event conducted by Overkill and mainly Bo himself. There's some secret loot to steal somewhere in Payday the Heist, and it's up to the players to search for clues in the game's official press material. Anderson would drop hints and forum posts via coded messages, making some mention to a random item or object in-game which seemed odd but had a deeper meaning. Ages of angst, sob, sob, sob. I have seen people almost there. So close, guys, you have to have faith. And if you don't, just take a hint from the French. Qu'est-ce que c'est? You want us to surrender? Sit down with a couple of friends in a quiet place and have a drink. It always makes me think better. Speaking of that, I'm almost back. Thanks for the cheers, guys. I'm soon back to my old evil self. Bo got a little ahead of himself at the end there, but obviously this was a message telling players to sit in the right spot in the French guy's basement on the DLC heist to cause a static sound to play, which upon reading the waveform reads God Ra Sil Hill, which when rearranged to read Yggdrasil reveals coordinates to a Pumapuku temple in Bolivia. This shit kept going back and forth for months, with fans reading every developer post like it's the Da Vinci Code. They started assuming that anything told to them by a figure of authority in the community had a hidden meaning, was dropping a new hint or confirming a theory. This kept players checking back in on the game obsessively and playing missions for secondary reasons. To look for hidden symbols, brainstorm conspiracies about where all this is leading. Bo was boosting engagement. A handful of incredibly dedicated players eventually cracked the case, and the reward for completing the stupidly long secret drill mission unlocked by it was some cool-ass masks and a chance to try Overkill's upcoming release, a sequel to Payday the Heist. Now, before the merger, Overkill and Starbreeze had already been conceptualizing another expansion to Payday, but now as Overkill Starbreeze, well, why stop there? The heist is good, but it's got legacy issues, and the thing people care most about now is a new product launch. A new marketplace, a new gaming platform to expand the Payday universe, and this time, no limits. Cast out the chains that hold you down and recast the chains you couldn't get back. But it's still the same old crew, the same old Payday. A solid, tested game loop, now with the latest technology and at least some funding. 505 Games agreed to do publishing, that's a foot in the door, and Starbreeze had a license for the Unreal 3 engine, so get ready for Payday in the Diesel engine. Again. Oh, but this time, they modified it. Called it Diesel 2.0. But what does that mean exactly, modified? When the engine's modularity is the entire point. I think what they're getting at is this sequel demanded more complicated interactions than the heist was ever built to support. So a lot of what was designed to just work in the first game had to be thrown out and started again. So if you remove enough of those previously built components and replace them with new ones, you've built the diesel engine of Theseus. The oil-leaking motorboat of Theseus. For all intents and purposes, this is the same engine suffering the same technical debt issues as before. The diesel engine is like a hydra sprouting new genres as heads, just as tough to kill. As late as 2022, you could still license a version of it. It's called the Machinery now. Or it was called that before the developers pulled the rug out and demanded anyone using it delete everything, vaguely citing some EULA bullshit they added only days before the takedown. Shit, I'm putting off talking about the game again, aren't I? So, Payday 2's development was informed by fan feedback.
Even though the game loop didn't come together until weeks before launch, it felt like, still the content was there. The look and feel of it all.
Maybe the passion also from the...
Yeah, and the passion.
While I personally prefer the longer heist missions, players, on average, wanted shorter levels with more variety. The skill system, which was once linear, is now more RPG-like, where you create different builds using a limited number of points. The more you level up, the stronger you get, but no one player can do literally everything. And then there's the stealth. At this point, we should talk about David Goldfarb. Ulf's got his hands full with design, so David takes the role of director.
Stuff that De Niro does in Heat.
It fits right in. He joins Starbreeze after a stint at DICE to add some depth to Payday 2's progression and game flow. Arguably, this guy is the spark that lit the fire of games comparing their difficulty to Dark Souls. He said once, quote,
"Now we've made the Dark Souls of heist games."
Nice.
Yeah.
The point he was trying to get at is that it's a game that's frustratingly difficult until you master it, which makes doing well feel more rewarding. Using earned skill points to create builds, complementing what parts of the game you're good at or like, instead of grinding for flat numerical stat increases. Payday the Heist had absurdist difficulties for clout, so sure, that all tracks.
The reason I use the Dark Souls heist comparison is because, or the Diablo 2 heist comparison is because,
I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls and Diablo 2.
The RPG mechanics feel like a natural step forward, makes the game more endlessly replayable as the first one boasted. David Goldfarb gave us his visions of those ideas, and without him, I don't think Payday 2 would have a full stealth mode, at least not on launch. He and Ulf wanted to conceptualize missions that, quote, weren't just fighting endless waves of dudes. They met resistance on this for a while, basically don't fuck with the formula. In the first game, stealth let you avoid a fight temporarily, but the fight would always find you. Sneaking around was almost entirely flavor. No Mercy's stealth proved they could do more though, so David and Ulf worked together with Ilya and his team and built the jewelry store heist to playtest. Avoid guards, cameras, keep civilians from running away, slip across the street with the loot, and escape. If you're caught, an alarm sounds, and then it becomes traditional Payday, the map's layout redefined as a combat space. They had to build all the stealth systems from the ground up. Maybe the complexity of varied map states and enemy AI is part of what contributed to calling the engine 2.0. I still don't buy it. Diesel's Diesel. Listen, here's one of the game's original playtesters or something, talking about the engine.
Fans off? No. Payday 1 and Payday 2, same engine, you had Payday 1 as a foundation.
That's Andreas Hill Penninger. He joined Star Kilbreeze around the same time Almir did, maybe a little later. Lovely fellow who will go on to be somewhat important down the road. But anyways, with Payday 2 going for smaller scale but more variable jobs instead of cinematic heists, some of which take place episodically, well, what's the shorter version of crime movies? Crime serials. Blue meth and drug deals gone south. Breaking Bad was a show that made me feel weird at the time because I was addicted to opiates. It's a pretty brutal watch for all the right reasons, if that makes sense. And it's got some incredible performances from Bryan Cranston, Giancarlo Esposito. You know, Giancarlo said getting that role as Gus on Breaking Bad was the light at the end of a very dark tunnel for him, lined in poverty. He thought about offing himself for the insurance money to provide for his family. So when Overkill came knocking asking for a performance, you can bet it came with a Payday 2. Big Bank was the first heist Payday 2 really had. Not to speak ill of all the other jobs, but thorough pre-planning and a litany of possible approaches with RNG still pushing for you to improvise and test your limits? That was some good shit. Players were willing to pay for DLC if it gave them such fluidity. Choosing your own heist equipment skill set, customizing your guns, truly, even on launch, Payday 2 had a ridiculous arsenal of guns to mess around with. Modding them out to click and clack just the right way was a big part of what drove people to this game over other shooters, which tended to have one take, one version of each firearm, which could never be exactly what the player wants to try. There's so much variety here. Goldfarb contributed to that too, apparently. Dark Souls, but with guns indeed. I bet that's where Bloodborne got the idea. Now, aesthetically, let's be real, Payday 2 ain't never been much to look at. It's like an MMO that's had over a decade of updates with varying texture quality and art styles, except the game launched looking like that. Cheap and compiled together. The constant variation is what makes that aesthetic acceptable. I don't really know what happened to the first game's art director, Robert F. Blom. He kinda dropped off the face of the earth. I'm not sure how much of the heist's art style can really be chalked up to his contributions. There's every possibility the old music tracks in his likeness were the extent of it. But the grit and grime of the heist's aesthetic is not translating to Diesel 2.0. Payday 2 was weirdly shiny, flat, aesthetically unfocused. The maps all feel like they were designed with readability in mind first, and then an artist just dumped a pile of random trash and pixel smear all over it. With props placed half-assedly like they didn't have an undo shortcut until 2 years after launch. It is not a pretty game to look at. But oh, is it a good one to listen to? Simon's still on the aux, making some of the most iconic techno beats in modern gaming history. These songs get used in videos, TV shows, all without permission. Simon's music is so good he can take on any genre, any recording method, and get something downright danceable out of it. I think Vic Lind used Overkill's label as a way to vamp, to test out his ability and mess with new equipment and release it to a massive audience. Cause yeah, you don't need me to tell you this, but Payday 2 was incredibly successful. It sold 1.5 million copies within a month of launch, most of them digitally. There's a buzz phrase about it you might recall. Payday 2 made back its development costs on pre-orders alone. This was a headline that went around a lot at the time, a siren call to the digital-first future of games. AAA promises with AA budgets is the future. But think about that for a second, right? Made back development costs is some clever shit, because these guys famously work for cheap. Sure, celebrity cameos cost a pretty penny, but that shit didn't happen until after launch. How How impressive is it really to make back costs on something you skimped out on expenses to produce? It's the kind of boast you tell investors to reassure them you're getting their money back. Literally, that's where this talking point comes from. To quote Bo Anderson, speaking to Starbreeze investors, so translated from Swedish, mind you, that Payday 2 generates revenue for the company 6 days before the release is of course very unusual for games of this size, and strengthens the long-term nature of our strategy. Okay, I talk smack on Bo Anderson a lot. He's the CEO of Starbreeze by this point, mostly through means of having stock and being bullheaded. But in the modern games industry, someone has got to do that job. I don't spite business boys for doing their dance to incite investment. The impressive part of Payday making back its costs isn't necessarily the sheer volume of cash, but in getting a hit with a smaller publisher like 505 Games, bulldozing right through the established industry ecosystem. The problem is, he's dragging his friends and loved ones' game development studio with him to meet this move fast and break things speed. To quote Payday 2's director, David Goldfarb, I had a really big problem with Bo, who was the CEO of Starbreeze. After Payday 2, a lot of the conflict and unhappiness became untenable. It was funny because the game was enormously successful, but in the way of all things, everybody writes the history of why they were successful. That's from an article discussing why David quit working at Starbreeze. Games as complex as Overkill were trying for are products that take large crews a long time to build and stress test before they can be ready for sale. Otherwise, you spend the first several weeks after launch desperately scrambling to fix game-breaking bugs and get on track for a roadmap of new breakable features. Games built as fast turnaround products like this don't have time to consider using a new engine, because changing engines so close to launch would surely doom the whole project. But there is never a not close to launch for these guys. Payday 2 came out 2 years after the heist and less than a year after that game's last content updates. Take a break. No, we can do it. If you take a break, it's gonna be so much more work later. We can do it now. Grin had spent years trying to get their hit, and when they died and came back with Payday, they got a taste. Bo was scrambling to make Payday 2 their big cash cow, their Marvel Cinematic Universe of gaming. No matter how many developers burn out and quit in the process. Because working that fast for that long starts to mess with your head. Human beings aren't meant to burn the candle at both ends like that for ostensibly creative works. When trying to create something from nothing on a deadline with all of this pressure to succeed, you lose touch with what's realistically possible and what's even real. You're so stressed about every little detail and a deadline ever closer and no way of knowing if people are gonna like it if it even gets finished on time at all. Working like that winds your ass up in the hospital. Couple years after Payday 2 launched, Ulf Andersson, programmer, designer, and main character actor, was checked into a hospital for psychosis. It lasted for hours, and it left him decommissioned for 8 months. Nowadays, it's known lore among the Payday community that Wolf lacks voice lines for almost everything that started development after launch. They sentence mixed a few lines from old audio,
It's a fucking medic!
but they sound like shit and just make the absence all the clearer. Most other characters can call out later added enemy types or objectives, but not Wolf. This is why. The stress of working on Payday 2, working at Overkill, hospitalized him. And Overkill fucking lied to us about it. Let me be clear, I understand the Andersons wanting to keep family matters personal, but it's another story when you've made your family a public-facing corporate entity like this, Bo! After Payday 2 launch, Ulf stopped showing up to work. Developers started asking, hey, when's Ulf coming back? And weeks turned into months before they slowly started realizing, oh, he's not coming back. Players were asking questions constantly, when's Wolf getting new voice lines? And I can only imagine what screaming incantations Bo was guilt-tripping his brother with. At first, Ulf's excuse was that he had back problems, which is entirely possible. Leaning over a keyboard can do that. I actually had my back giving out while working on this fucking video. But time passes, still no Ulf. End of 2014 and suddenly, whoa, a Christmas song? And there's Ulf screaming along.
On the 4th day of Christmas, Payday $5 million!
Jeez, that sounds rough, huh? According to Simon Viklund, Ulf would scream so hard when he recorded Wolf, he developed actual scar tissue on his throat. And this is a real problem. Screamo singers have to practice the art form in a way that doesn't destroy their vocal cords like that, the kind of training a game designer isn't likely to get. But It's another convenient excuse, isn't it? Ulf could muster the energy to shout a few lines for his buddy's Christmas thing. That's lower stakes than a full booth recording session. I believe that Ulf damaged his throat. I don't believe the Christmas special is what did it. Those screams sound rough, but professionally rough. Maybe there were takes we didn't hear, but out of what made it to the final cut, this is the one scream I could see making a case for damaging his throat, the way his voice shakes.
Where's the
Gnarly, the kind of performance you give when you're not planning to give another one. Yeah, impress fans with intense-ass delivery, and then you can tell people, sorry man, blew out my vocal cords, can't come into the studio, and buy yourself a couple months to process and come to terms with your mental health. Ulf's voice needs to heal was the go-to explanation in the community for a lack of new Wolf voice lines. That was bullshit. An old bud of mine, Sir Crackerbulb, interviewed Ulf at the time, who confirmed, yeah, that was an exaggeration.
I remember hearing about the Christmas song you did last year. Apparently you really injured yourself.
No, that was more of a joke, I think, from Simon's part, but it was, yeah.
He was being careful with his throat. He absolutely could have voiced Wolf again if circumstances were different, but Bo would throw a fit if anyone so much as mentioned Ulf's name, so it never happened. I could go on about it, but another fella from back in the Payday 2 days, who I'm sure remembers me, made a video at the time delving into the whole thing. It's pretty damn good. We didn't know much about Ulf's hospitalization at the time, though. But we knew it wasn't vocal cord damage that stopped Ulf from coming back. It was that his brother drove their game development studio to become the exact kind of greedy fintech nightmare that he couldn't stand. Crossover after crossover, paid DLC after paid DLC. If Ulf wanted to keep working on Payday, it would mean grinding endlessly to create visions of other people's IPs, working on other people's ideas. John Wick, Hotline Miami, fucking Alesso. The fundamental difference between these brothers is that Ulf sees overwork as a problem, and Bo sees it as a solution to scale. It was selling microtransactions that broke the dam. Almir Listo infamously promised there would be no microtransactions in Payday 2 and shamed fans for even asking. Another bold-faced fucking lie. The story went that 505 Games were the ones that pressured Overkill Starbreeze into doing this. That is and always was bullshit. 505 handled the logistics side of publishing, but the game development and Steam marketplace integrations were all on Starbreeze. Overkill timed releasing and eventually walking back microtransactions to make it look like it was 505 Games' fault.
We at Starbreeze signed a historic agreement where we acquired all the rights to the Payday franchise. Going forward, it's only us and you guys who decide what's going into Payday. To celebrate, any new generation saves that drops will be dropping completely for free.
But don't feel too bad. 505 got something out of all this. See, what the traffic cone here is saying is that Starbreeze goes on to claw back exclusive publishing rights to Payday for $30 million in its own stock. And they'll sweeten the deal and agree to let 505 Games take 33% of Payday 3's future profits. Jesus Christ! We will talk more about that later on. There's some limits and asterisks there, but an entire third gone. Holy shit. Almir claimed microtransactions were necessary to keep funding development. But that's only true when you're developing at this breakneck pace and when your CEO keeps cutting such dumbass deals. Opening a new revenue stream from the Steam marketplace sales on safes, weapon skins, and stat increases on weapon skins found in those saves, having to pay real money to unlock them at first, all of that was decided on by Starbreeze. And here's what it cost them. Ulf Anderson and Simon Viklund got the fuck out of that den of wolves. The game's designer, composer, and two of the main characters gone from the company. Word is that the Andersons had an explosive fight over plans for microtransactions and probably everything else sometime in the first half of 2015. May rolls around and Ulf Anderson sells his shares in Starbreeze. Simon kept making tunes and voicing Bane for a while, but less and less often until he finally stopped completely in 2018. Almir confirmed to fans on the subreddit that Ulf had decided to move on, but would still be doing game design for Overkill and voicing Wolf, which to me doesn't sound much like moving on, does it? It sounds like the bullshit promises of a man desperately clinging onto the relationships that made his funny clown game work, be it Bo, Almir, or maybe even Ulf himself. Ulf Andersson confirmed near the end of 2015 he wouldn't be voicing Wolf again, that he had fun designing Payday 2 past tense, but it's over now. And he was starting a new studio, 10 Chambers Collective. They've shortened the name since. Their motto was, and this speaks to Ulf's mentality at the time better than anything else, inspire or manipulate, collaborate or compete, quality or quantity. In life, friendship, and in all things we create, our passion is quality. It'd take them around 4 years to release a game, a much healthier development cycle for a studio of their size. I'll have more to say about 10 Chambers later. But for now, we are still talking about Payday 2. Every bad decision it made, every community member and developer it chewed up and spit out. A series of hype-generating events to cover up a monetization schema insidiously crafted to keep you buying even when the content sucks because the developers didn't have time to iterate a better design. Both the game devs and consumers were being pressured to keep up. You can't just miss out on the big new update. You need to complete everything in it to get ready for the next one. Shit, sorry. I have trouble talking about Payday 2. When I first got into the game, it was during a pretty terrible time in my life, so it's hard to judge the game fairly when my memories associate it with bad mental health days. And if I have trouble talking about this game, how the fuck must Ulf feel? I've never had psychosis, though I guess it'd be hard to know for sure. But I have been hospitalized for a mental breakdown. I have bipolar too. Didn't know it for a long time, and hindsight is obvious now. When I was visiting family in 2019, wasn't their fault, but I had a bad mental snap and an ambulance dragged me to a mental ward. Really, it was a drunk tank where people were screaming all night long and a fight broke out while I was waiting for the meds they gave me to kick in. The whole bullshit affair cost us thousands of dollars, and I still have nightmares about it. When I look back on the end of that year now, try as I might, but all I can think about is the time I spent in that place. If Ulf Andersson can look back on Payday 2 and feel anything but regret, panic, and trauma, then he's stronger than I could ever be. How do you even look at the video game, featuring your face, likeness, voice, and damn near your name, puppeteering a stereotype of a screaming psychotic killer, when you were actually experiencing psychosis? Every fan, developer, interviewer, so excited to sing the praises of a project that nearly destroyed your life, asking you the same questions you still don't have answers to 1,000 unopened emails later. How do you face your own brother after that? When the thing you both worked to wire and bone on succeeded at the cost of your own personal relationship? Companies with a "we're all family here" mentality are toxic as is, but it's horrifying to be abused by blood like that. How do you face your own mother when she's head of administration at your asshole brother's company? The guilt Ulf must have felt for snapping, the anger at that guilt, the unwarranted, unfair fury at friends and loved ones who are desperately just trying to help, but can't because everything they want out of your life would drive you insane. How do you start working on new projects again, when all anyone ever expects out of you is payday? God damn it! In September of 2016, I was bored and messing around with community-made mods for Payday 2. I found the idea of custom heists neat and wanted to show one off to some people I was in a Discord server with. But I felt like just typing out my thoughts was boring, didn't convey the emphasis I needed, so I threw together a minute-long video in Windows Movie Maker explaining the pros and cons of modding the game. When it came together, I was surprised at how professional it felt, despite being cheap and shitty. So instead of keeping it unlisted, I shared it not just in the server, but on the Payday 2 subreddit. Overnight, I got 1,000 views, and I realized I could do that again. A couple months go by, and suddenly I'm up past 10,000 subscribers, just making videos about my odds and ends thoughts on game mechanics and DLC in my, at the time, favorite game. I could get paid for arguing statistics on fictional guns. My first YouTube check ever paid a ticket to save our car from getting impounded. It made an immediate difference in my life. YouTube as a career became very real, very fast to me. Over time, I met up with other creators who made Payday 2 videos. Some of them cooler than others. There were people who were clearly just trying to use me to leapfrog in popularity, but others who were super casual about the whole thing. Just happy to have people to hang out and play the game with. And Payday 2's community was far and away one of the most active and vocal ones for a game I've ever seen. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to Almir. His infectious personality and willingness to be the butt of the joke, paired with some aggressive community drives to gain Steam followers and social media presence, Overkill Starbreeze had gotten their community used to talking and being heard, so reaching out to content creators was natural. Having talked to and befriended a couple of the community moderators for the Payday 2 Steam group, they were absolutely happy to be in it for the fun and love of the game. At first. But the more the community was encouraged to be vocal about their desire for the direction of the game, the more entitled people got. I was certainly guilty of this. It was an echo chamber of proto-crypto types who loved to argue with authority figures that their vision of the future of this project was better. Except instead of arguing technical infrastructure or visions for society, it's a video game about clowns robbing banks. Point being, the cross-section of people who like games where you fidget with military equipment like toys, and people who enjoyed winning arguments on the internet, spurred on by an over-enthusiastic company soaked in an endless rush of hype, we were all insulating ourselves from any objective reality, from the practicalities of game development, the logistics of cameo costs. I think of those community managers who were paid in merch. And the ones who did get money weren't being paid nearly enough for what the job entails, for the kinds of horrific shit posted on the Steam forums. And I know this is where I'm gonna lose some of you, but I'll be quick. For a game all about fighting law enforcement, it was stunning how much of the community was off-put by me being gay. That shouldn't be surprising though, right? It was the mid-2010s and a first-person shooter, but Payday 2 in particular really let you express yourself in a way other games couldn't. In a way that was socially acceptable to gamer pals of the era. It's not queer that you're making pink masks, pink guns, escape vans straight out of Barbie. It's customization. It's a custom mask, a way of expressing yourself which cannot be denied. Your mask is what gives you safety in this world, and by designing your perfect presentation, it's like modding Fallout New Vegas or going shopping in GTA 5. It's a chance to, in a medium where you're expected to be aggressive and macho in a socially acceptable way, project personality. Your own expression, and one which could be passive. I like to be friendly, but I'm an introvert at heart, and I tend to work better alone on projects, on my videos about weird specific stats and game mechanics, so I preferred to record alone, in random servers with random players. But I started to get recognized, and very likely people would try to hold a conversation, which is nice and all, but distracting when I'm trying to work, trying to think about the game critically. Or worse, a player would start spouting absolutely heinous and offensive stuff that would make me have to go find another game, as none of the footage with slurs on screen would be usable. Eventually, I just started changing my name and hoping players wouldn't see my level in check. This is all shit a lot of people have to put up with to play games, but for it to be part of your job, it's draining as fuck. Now, that's not to say there weren't people who were genuinely friendly. I've met friends playing this game I hold so close and dear, and I've gotten so many emails and DMs from old fans who just wanted to let me know what my videos meant to them. I've read them all, seriously. Thank you. And I think a lot about the friendships that might have turned out differently if I had stuck around. But I just couldn't keep doing Payday. I couldn't keep up the energy needed to be an influencer at a speed like that. Positivity supercharged by tech bros and hype men turned toxic fast. There was this overwhelming desire, incentive to be excited about every little thing, to blow out my opinions to nostalgia critic tier levels to match the intensity. But I didn't want to make videos literally screaming and ranting, so I increased a different kind of volume. I made new videos every day of Payday's week-long update events. It was a strategic decision. Having that expectation of a new opinion every day, a rundown of what to be excited about, garnered a lot of views, which translated to a lot of ad revenue, allowing me to move to a new apartment and eventually another one. I was boosting engagement. Overkill facilitated this. A select few allowed into their partner program, which they apparently still have. We'll talk about that later. They're special influencers who might talk some smack on the game, but while still promoting it. They gave us DLC codes, sometimes early access, to make our job of being an unofficial brand ambassador easier. And each individual in that entire chain isn't really doing anything wrong, are they? It's just moderators helping content creators out to keep the community active. And hey, at least I was getting paid. The mods and the mod makers, safely guiding and driving the community, didn't get shit, but kept at it because maybe if they grind hard enough, they'll get noticed and hired by Overkill. I had a friend, might be watching now, that moderated Payday forums in exchange for swag. He dealt with truly just the worst shit I've ever heard in my life, but laughed off not being paid properly by saying, quote, "The shirts are very comfy." The whole thing felt like a fucking pyramid scheme. Several times, I had to reschedule my real life around surprise update weeks in Payday 2 because I would be at the ready to make a daily video like a good little Overkill approved creator, and then the next month take that ad revenue and work towards improving my life and invest in better tech to keep the cycle going. But as you get older and get diagnosed with a couple health problems, your cost of living increases. It makes you go from trying to gain ground in life by taking advantage of the hype to being a perpetuator of the hype system itself. I couldn't afford not to be. It was more profitable for me to fake the enthusiasm, energy, and grind of a tech bro, and I burned out on that extremely fast. I couldn't keep up. I would overpromise on videos and streams and underdeliver when my health failed. I had someone make a whole fucking content cop video about me not keeping my promises to fans, which, much like iDubbbz, they've since walked back. I appreciate that. But that was the energy of the community. I'm sure I said some bogus shit at the time which merited criticism, but being critical and criticized over the video game I was supposed to be having fun with infected every part of my life. I couldn't play games anymore without it feeling like work. I was abandoning my ego and I was disgusted by what was replacing it. It was the Reservoir Dogs update that finally broke me. I was between housing, staying with family on terrible satellite internet, rushing to get a video done as quickly as possible because it would take hours extra just to upload. On one monitor, I was watching Reservoir Dogs, the actual movie, as I had never seen it and thus had no material for making a video on it. On the other monitor, I was recording Payday and playing the Reservoir Dogs heist, tabbing out to write a script to read and release day of. My partner dragged me away from the computer and sat my ass down at a Culver's. I remember being in the booth, but everything else was completely drowned in Quentin Tarantino bullshit. In Payday bullshit. I was working myself to exhaustion to try and advance in life for a game I was starting to actively hate. Content started to reflect the community more and more as time went on, bending to the whims of people who thought Walter White did nothing wrong. The game went from having the aesthetic of 90s heist films to the rancid vibes of a Scarface poster in a basement bar. From a metrics point of view, Payday 2's stoking of its community in this fashion was brilliant. For a long time, they really did have an exponentially growing audience to sell DLC to, hooked on Hotline Miami and Point Break crossovers. You've heard of Sons of Anarchy, right kids? Well, we got Hellboy from it. He only cost us a cool figures. Gotta spend money to make money to increase the expectations so that you have to spend more money to get any sales at all. Looking back now, Payday 2 got a sinful amount of DLC, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of it. But at the time, when you're in that hype bubble, when you're on board the fucking hype train, if 3 months went by without an update, people would start speculating if the game was dead. That's insane, right? But I felt the same way. That became the anticipated pace of development. And it's a bullshit position to put your studio in, who are trying to avoid allegations of destroying the game's balance with pay to win, while it has a community saying stupid crap like this. Would I recommend the Diamond DLC? Yeah, I can't say I would. Aside from cosmetics, all this DLC nets you is the heist itself. If this pack included some weapons, I might look at this differently, but as is, for many people, myself included, the Diamond DLC is considered the worst heist DLC in the game. Like, what did I fucking want? I was trying to be pro-consumer, but that's basically asking for powerful new weapons to put behind paywalls. But getting weapons with the levels had been standardized. New guns was new gab. The price tag became a talking point, something to engage with, feel camaraderie over. Arguments between the paying and the free. Waiting to get community versions of essentially the same weapon concepts a couple months later was an eternity. The day-to-day felt so much longer, so much more important when you're a kid with too much free time and the game you like to play is constantly cultivating you for what little cash you have, asking you to check back in to support the cause. Charging $20 for a pack of glowing masks as a limited time offer investment in the future of the game, which had blown a ridiculous amount of money on stunt casting and copyright, made the whole goddamn community have the air of a cult. But I didn't realize that until I was fully invested, until I had become a preacher, until it was too late and leaving it would ruin my life. Payday 2 gave me a career. It got me an apartment and it fixed my teeth and it taught me so much of what I know about media production today. Nobody cared who I was before. But no, that's wrong. My future husband did. My family did. Friends and loved ones who cared, who saw what I was doing to myself and convinced me I had to quit. I had to. Wherever this ride may take you, my stop is up ahead. Not to get depressing on you, but I've I've reached my limit. Well over 3,000 hours and hundreds of videos on this game have made me grow weary. I will not be making any more videos on Payday 2. I couldn't bring myself to launch Payday 2 for this video. The last time I played it was in 2020, peak pandemic. A friend and I tried out the border crossing ice to San Martin Bank. I had a pretty decent time, but all the while, I was nervous someone would find out. I didn't want the Payday community to see me playing it, didn't want the heat. While researching and playing Payday 3 for this video, I found out the subreddit was onto me. I can't play the game without being screenshotted and talked about, and like, I was kind of expecting that, so no worries, seriously. That's how micro-celebrity works. That's how this community works. The developers had spent years priming them to theorycraft, look out for secret clues, rare events. Speculating who from back in the day would return to the heisting fray was what got us big old character returns updates. They just did the same thing again while I was making this video. Derek Ray's back, great! When you make yourself a public figure like that, that kind of theorizing about your life is inevitable. But I made a point of being done with Payday 2. I had to be, for my own sake. If I just tried casually playing it, I'd be hounded by players. Millions of them. No, I'm not exaggerating. I tried streaming it one time in 2019, and Almir thought it'd be nice to, without telling me, alert 3 million people that I was live by pushing a notification to the Steam group, suddenly pressuring me to go from casual gameplay mode to influencer mode on camera. What? I am not going back to being a Payday content creator. I was just playing the video game for fun. From 80 to 1,000 viewers? Oh boy, okay. Did Steam just notify everyone who owns the game? Anyone who's in the Steam group? Which is millions of people. Oh boy, that just kind of sunk in all of a sudden. Maybe this is why you should like be contextually aware of what's going on when you decide to make an announcement of a third party streaming your video game. But yeah. Some of you are probably scratching your heads, maybe even upset. Getting millions of people to look at your stream sounds amazing, right? Well, it's not if they aren't there for you. If they're only there to ask questions about lore and mechanics for a game you're barely playing and insult you for your answers, looking for an argument they can win with the silencer skills guy. Yeah, the viewer count is slowly going down when people realize that I do other things other than Payday 2. So why do you hate Payday 2? I don't hate Payday 2. That same day of the stream, just before I went live, I had released a video talking about how critics didn't give Rhyme a fair shake, which, as is the case for any Payday YouTuber making non-Payday stuff, got 1/10 of the viewership anything Payday ever would. And whatever, right? Gotta grow a new audience, that's fine, but then I had a chat full of people asking me for several months worth of opinions on a game I only wanted to play for a couple of hours. None of them gave a shit about some fucking Journey knockoff. They wanted to know where the How Do ECM Jammers Work video is. I stuck the stream out, did my best, and then had a nervous breakdown as soon as the camera was off. That whole debacle was Almir Listo's fault, and it was relayed to me at the time that he apparently lost some community publishing privileges at the company because of it. Look, Almir, if you're watching this, I forgive you. Obviously you thought you were helping, and it did help in at least one way. I checked the email after stream and see I made a bunch of money off of donations and subscriptions during my public mental health crisis. That's what really got to me. In that moment, I knew that if I accepted my lot as a grinding influencer for this brand, I'd be set for life. But I couldn't fucking make myself do that. I'm too emotionally unstable and socialist to be some company's golden goose. I tried streaming once or twice more, but eventually I had to cut myself off, so I quit playing entirely and uninstalled. Besides, at some point when they added crossplay with the Epic Game Store and made the peer-to-peer game reliant on a server connection which constantly goes down. There's a launch command to bypass that, but I mean, for what? So I can lose another 3,000 hours, 4 months of my life to a game that's already constantly in my dreams? Because I am scared. I am terrified that I would get addicted to this game again, but be unable to have fun with it as I constantly look over my shoulder, just taking a hit after hit without the high. And this video is long enough as it is. Were I to detail every single step of Payday 2's strange journey, I'm sure it could take up 3 entire videos. In fact, I know this because my friend Jay has done as much already. If you're in the mood for several more hours of emotional retrospectives on this dumb franchise, she's done incredible work laying out the whole story. I can't do that. If I try to get into detail, my mind goes to a mad place, tries to replicate the frenzy of work I would throw myself into, hoping to distract from unmedicated chronic pain and mental illness. So, just like Overkill did when adding new voice lines to Wolf, I'll be reusing stuff I've already recorded for this game. Sorry. Don't feel bad for playing Payday. I'm not here to guilt trip you. That'd be fucking stupid. It's a fun game with plenty of content and clever execution. There is so much to like about it. I had hundreds of hours in the game before it became a job for a reason. Keep on playing it if you're into it. Rewatch my old videos if it makes you happy. Just simply be aware that the people making this stuff, especially at speed, have their own lives to worry about. And stay aware of your own health too. If you feel like you're playing the game out of some sunk cost fallacy, if you're not actually having fun, you've gotta stop. Find something else that fulfills you. It's so easy to ignore the warning signs, feel like something is wrong but not be able to see you're a part of it. Until you're making videos about storming the United States Capitol to kill the alien deep state and take over the government. My highest viewed video of all time is a guide to completing the Payday 2 secret, the big follow-up to the Heists ARG. That was the last piece I'd made about Payday, aside from an April Fool's bit. Give Starbreeze money directly. That was near the end of 2018, so Donald Trump was president and the QAnon cult was in full worship. A group of irony-pilled 4chaners who love to decode hidden meaning in their leaders' messages, all being fed by an unknown source named Q. Meanwhile, Overkill had its own anonymous writer, dropping hints and coordinating this whole story. Wordsmith, Joe Nobody. Bo tried drumming up some conspiracy shit on the big oil job, but it didn't really take. So instead, this rando games writer joins Overkill, cooks up some rancid shit in a basement hidden under the White House heist, and then bounced. I kinda already blew the biggest plot beat, but spoilers for Payday 2. The big secret ending was using the ancient Ark buried under the Capitol to body swap the president, the American one, with Bane, your man in the van, stealing the United States of America. But it's good, you see, because Bane was sick and dying. If we didn't use the Mayan gold to power up the ancient alien machine, then the ageless entity inhabiting the body of Gus Breaking Bad was gonna do it instead. So there. Christ Tabernacle. Watching my video again, I can hear in my voice how frustrated I was with this entire affair. As if all the events prior have not been confusing and arbitrary enough, it gets more challenging from here. Stroll over to the piano located in Scarface's fully upgraded room. Here you are to play the oldest song in the world. Upon the stroke of the 9th note, you'll be granted the sound of unlocking an achievement, and the apparatus will align into its final form. Oh yeah, just spend the John Wick V-Bucks to play ancient melodies on Scarface's piano to create the apparatus. Yeah, that fucking scans. In order to unlock the secret, you will need to be the host of the White House heist contract on Overkill or above. All 4 players in the lobby have completed the tasks laid out for them by their obsidian tablets. At the final stretch of the elevator's descent, you'll be greeted by an open cavern housing a giant, impressive wheel. The moment a player lays hands upon the monument, hell itself is unleashed upon the world. So-called Guardians of the Ark, literal demon cloakers, inhuman hellspawn will fire upon you and your crew. Oh, the demons! Under the White House, yeah, demons. Yeah, those ones. This is the Ark of the Watcher. This is the treasure Bane was truly seeking, baffling as it may be. The bag of Mayan gold Locke brought with him must be snagged and its contents distributed along the outer ring of the Ark. This will, quote, feed it, and when complete will activate its incomprehensible power. Hey, is this the machine they used to put the wife in the arm? Bane used the Ark of the Watcher to interchange bodies with the President of the United States. By doing so, he pardons the crew of any and all legal ramifications and can control the entire government with no one the wiser. We stole the United States of America. That was truly the greatest heist of all. Well, you know what, Joe? I'd stay anonymous too if I wrote that stupid shit. But if you're watching thinking, well, that's too stupid to take seriously, who cares? I'll tell you who cared. A legion of teenagers and young adults on Reddit and Steam forums who spent every waking minute trying to decode hidden messages and updates and patch notes. This was a lifestyle for some people. I know, I was fucking there. When your writers mindlessly parody Indiana Jones and whatever's on the so-called History Channel to pad out your Illuminati story, when you take this wear your inspirations on your sleeve approach to fairy tales, urban legends, and conspiracy theories, what, you're saying that the diamond from the affair of the diamond necklace, the one that's literally too expensive to sell, that's the whole thing, That diamond was so good it let Hitler rise to power, and then he killed himself about it? What the fuck? That's just fascist conspiracy shit from the perspective of the fascists. The idea that Hitler had supernatural abilities that let him rise to power. Nazis were as obsessed with this occult shit as neo-Nazis are today. Nah, Hitler didn't kill himself, it was just the power of the diamond. Now available for $6.99. I had to check the wiki to confirm how much the Diamond DLC used to cost, and they had a trivia section critiquing the trailer's historical accuracy. Because the gun Hitler shot himself with was the wrong model. That's the most Payday 2 shit I've ever read in my fucking life. Like, they're shoveling deck chairs on the Titanic, and then there's counting caliber on the Hitler gun. Look, if you enjoyed the Payday 2 secret, good for you. I do not mean to insult you. It was designed to be entertaining. Kenny, if you're there, I'm still in awe of how you were able to unpack all this shit. Me, though? Look, I like myself a weird mishmash of the occult. Lemon Demon, Paradise Killer, some World of Darkness. But when done this carelessly, when themed to the subject matter of greed and wealth and government conspiracy, as you ask teenagers to practice decoding secret meanings out of forum posts from people in positions of power and then storm the Capitol, it hits too close to home. In real life, I saw people go down conspiracy rabbit holes about lizard men, about QAnon, about autism from vaccines. People who thought they could decode the intentions of the deep state from the Covfefe tweet. People who'd suggest a Pizzagate heist and were only half joking. There's a person I used to play Payday with that I once called a friend, who went all in on the Storm conspiracy about COVID, the bullshit theory that the virus was faked so the government could snatch up all the creeps in Hollywood. And if you're watching this, man, it's okay to admit that you're a victim of severe misinformation. Please snap out of it, dude. Fuck, Overkill's scope as to what constitutes a heist was so trapped into a specific era that's since gone and passed by. So anytime they needed something to up the ante, they broadened the scope without checking what's there first. They confidently walked into border disputes, war crimes, and QAnon conspiracies because it's all the same American counterculture to them over in Sweden. No wonder celebs and brands alike don't come back. The game's voice actors got dragged into this shit too. A couple of years early to be promoting fascist conspiracies on Twitter, huh? Call it parody, satire, overblown, or misunderstood. If you were to sit Ron Perlman down and really explain to him the plot of the secret ending to Payday 2, he'd probably call up Starbreeze and demand Rust be retroactively removed from the game.
Wait, so they storm the Capitol and then try to install their guy as president by force. Isn't this that punk-ass Batman game?
All I'm saying is that there were absolutely some mask-off clowns at January 6th. We can't blame Payday 2 for that. But I can certainly regret helping to promote such a stupid-ass story, helping to normalize daily decoding on message boards as an activity for a future generation of career criminals. And deleting the video now would probably just fuel that fire. What are you trying to hide? Besides, I can't pretend that the ad revenue from it hasn't helped sustain me these past couple of years. Even today, I'm still part of the fucking problem. I still need my Payday 2. That's funny. While I was working on this video, Simon Viklund gave a new interview about Payday, and I felt a strange kinship reading it. Like, oh yeah, you're also talking about the clown game people remember you for in hopes they'll check out your new work. Yeah, Bane was being pushed out of the story for a reason. They started contracting in other composers for a reason. It's pretty difficult to keep remoting in voice lines and tunes for the company tainted by your friend and colleague's piece of shit brother. And by this point, a lot of other people had left Overkill Starbreeze anyways. It was not the same company anymore. Goldfarb was gone in 2014. He was bored with making first-person shooters. Level designer Joachim Skoglund left before 2013 even gotten started. And as for Ilya, he has his own project we'll get to under Starbreeze, so Payday's not his priority. Artist Tomislav Spajik left to work for 10 Chambers for a while before doing his own thing. Technical artist Anders Bodbaka is still there. Lead animator Linus Anderberg never even made it to Payday 2's conceptualization phase. Overkill turned Starbreeze into a new version of itself and then cannibalized. The company that remains is not quite either entity, merely coasting on their predecessor's final breaths. As far as I can tell, the only employees of note from the original team who still work on Payday to this day are lead programmer Martin Varn, Almir, and his QA tester buddy Andreas. I could be missing some people, sorry for not dragging you into all this, I guess? Most everyone who's at Starbreeze now are new employees working with old employees' problems, and the studio spent so long hyping updates built at breakneck pace, they didn't have time to get working console versions. Not to mention Sony and Microsoft's patch verification process. So, Breezerkill just gave up on Xbox and PlayStation updates after a while, opting to instead sell new console versions every couple years with whatever content they got working patched in, as the new hardware generations trudged on. Inexplicably, they made a Switch release that runs like ass and is missing half the damn game. These console ports were almost games, built because they were promises to shareholders, not actually intended to be played as anything more than a novelty of convenience for those without PCs good enough to render inefficient landscapes and mountains of particle effects. Payday 2 grew into a cancer of a video game, with paid expansions like Tumors, briefly entering remission when they bundled nearly all the paid DLC together into one singular package. And you know, that's nice. They had to work with Valve to make this happen. It took a lot of effort, all on the promise that, save for the stupid-ass H3H3 crossover, there would be no more paid DLC. This also was a fucking lie.
Hola, heisters.
Over $100 of new DLC has been added after their no more paid DLC promise. Ultimate Edition doesn't even exist anymore. Legacy Edition took its place, which has the first 5 years of DLC, but the latter 5 fucking years is separate. Hey, Starbreeze, when you make a promise on the assumption that the circumstances won't change, you don't get to blame the circumstances for breaking that promise. You take that shit into account when you make the public statement. Now we're breaking the Ultimate Edition promise of forever free content. The reasoning for this is plain and simple. We want to. So, Payday 2 just kept grooving, same as ever, but with different music. New truckload of DLC, plot hooks, contractors, and Locke's the guy now, huh? Then there's the suit customization and the cowboy, the stuff in Texas, a lot of stuff in Texas, and an entire-ass storyline in Texas. They did the same trick all aging rock stars do and went country. Apparently, all these heists take place in a small window of time just before the gang hangs Mike Pence. Payday 2's final years were like an anime stuck in a filler arc while waiting for the manga to catch up. Bane will succumb to his illness in 5 minutes. I think a lot of gamers look back on Payday 2 now the way they do with the first Killing Floor, at least a little bit. Very driven by mods, boatloads of DLC, starts getting a little weird in the later years. Gas grenades, are you fucking serious? Fighting GenSec in the Geneva Convention at equal spec. The game's outdated engine, in time and with stability patches, becomes something which can run on modern-era potato machines. Modders learn to make it their own and start doing crazy shit, stuff I couldn't have imagined when I was making crappy glove reskins and texture swaps for Payday the Heist. The last big DLC dropped just a couple months shy of a decade after launch, June 2023. Seemed to be well received by the player base, and that's cool. I was cut and out of the community by the end of Payday 2's official life support, so I won't pretend to know all the details. So with things finally winding down for Payday 2, with developers and community members getting off the wild ride, and yet you are contractually obligated to give an entire third of any proceeds a sequel could make to one of your minor stakeholders, what do? Well, Overkill turned to monsters, and Starbreeze declared war. Bo Anderson got his successful game studio. He got his crossovers and his celebrities and his Payday 2. All it cost him was his personal relationships. But it's okay, it's new times. His brother and old mates just couldn't adapt fast enough. They weren't willing to make games as quickly as Bo could sell them. Starbreeze wants to be both a developer and publisher. That's their whole thing. Sure, Payday is what they're known for, but just like the rest of us, it's not all they do. Bo was, as promised, treating the company like a tech startup, investing in the next hype bubble.
Holy fuck bananas! And that's exactly what this is.
John Wick Chronicles was a virtual reality exclusive title Starbreeze published in collaboration with the films, using the same connections that got them not quite Keanu, as well as Charon, played by the late great Lance Reddick, may he rest in peace. The same can't be said for Chronicles, a literal tech demo of a product that was vapid, short, and sold for $30 before being removed from sale when the license expired. At least the John Wick Payday DLC is still... no, there that goes too. But it's not all bad. Dead by Daylight's another IP-fueled, DLC-driven, community-centric game that Starbreeze got to publish for a good couple years before selling the rights back to the developers. Behavior's kept the game going since, hooking in crossovers from all over the horror genre. It's a good asymmetrical PvP game, if buggy, runny, crashy. I'd call it Eurojank, but this one's actually the French-Canadians' fault. Désolé. And there's another studio we should talk about that Starbreeze published a game for. In fact, they did marketing, resource allocation, and even development for. Lion Game Lion is Payday level designer Ilya Petrusic's own studio, established with his brother and close friends in 2014 in Zagreb, Croatia. They started off with contracting work for Payday 2. Basically, Ilya did the thing that Almir claimed Ulf was going to do, leave to make his own games while still sending in voiced characters, maps, and storylines. The bomb heists were alright, sure, but over time, LGL made some of Payday's very foundational DLC, stuff players take for granted now. The Golden Grin Casino, named after the place Ilya worked at 3 companies ago. The Dragon Character Pack, a Croatian heister played by a real former bank robber. He's a lot of fun. And the Butcher, the badass arms dealer lady who stepped in to cover for Gage and put a little meat on our guns' bones. It's Payday. LGL are the ones who got driving working for the game. However clunky it is, it's still allowed for maps based around Grand Theft Auto-ry. Their mark on the franchise is clear. People still ask when Payday 3 will get a casino heist, and Starbreeze are gearing up to bring Dragon back with more ARG shit as I'm reading this. Though, the actress who plays the Butcher, another Croatian, you may remember her, Mira Furlan, she passed away in 2021 from West Nile. So, I'm sure Starbreeze will do the respectful thing and retire her character between games. But for now, it's still the Payday 2 days. Starbreeze has already told investors they're working on Payday 3, and their current big hit game is planning out its first finale with an Ancient Aliens arc. If you're a businessman, you're not gonna retire a legacy product without a new line on the floor already to replace it. You've gotta hedge your bets. If all this apocalypse shit doesn't pan out, what would be a safer topic to publish? You guessed it, the premier video game adaptation of World War II!
Burn the enemy alive! Our target, Hitler!
Though, seriously, that's not a bad idea. Former Starbreeze folk made the new Wolfensteins. Payday had historical weaponry packs. And it's a little reminder to your core audience that being anti-fascist is a good thing. Raid World War II dropped late 2017, developed by the Lions and published by Starbreeze. Yet another co-op heisting game, borrowing a lot from the engine, game flow, and design of the, at the time, still immensely popular Payday 2. Crossovers constantly reminding you of one another, constantly encouraging comparison. Now, in exchange for half the game's revenue, Starbreeze allotted a cool $8 million to development, but not a penny of it in places that mattered. They got John Cleese to vamp on a green screen, but were still reliant on cobbled-together tools and overworked programmers to develop. The title was more competent than it had any right to be given the developmental circumstances, and I think a lot of that can be chalked up to Ilya and his mates being very invested in seeing this project through.
For the developers, they've been, locked in for a very long time, just crunching, looking at the game, and, sometimes they're not really happy with it and they're questioning themselves. So bringing them to PAX and showcasing the game and getting the reception that they got was just amazing.
If people like this, then we can't do less. We just need to even ramp it up more, just even more pressure. Then you have the thing in your head, holy fuck, now we can fuck up.
Because the reward at the end of the curve is people enjoy something you made. And right now we get small tidbits of it.
I feel bad for him, man, and all the LGL guys. Raid didn't do great. It's pretty obvious now why a 4-player heisting game with legacy engine issues, trapped in combat sensibilities of early 2010s horde shooters, competing with Payday 2 for players, didn't take off. It's one of the last games made on that older model of Diesel, so it's got its problems. The usual, buggy, runs like shit, crashes a lot, but you're well used to that if you're into these kind of games. If you were to buy Raid nowadays, paying a sixth of the price that I did, you might have a good time with it, but could probably understand why it didn't take off. And that's saying something, because this is the state it's in after years of improvements. Matter of fact, thanks to dedicated community members working with LGL directly, as I was making this video, Raid got a huge update and several smaller patches that really did address a lot of problems. Performance is better, combat balance is more forgiving, changes to loot carrying, a whole new proficiency system. Like, it's a laundry list of improvements. improvements. Fight on, lads, blammo sweep. It's funny, these dog tags were in swag bags sent out to influencers before release, myself included. They were somewhere in my closet, so I had to go scouring every shelf and corner to find them. I was searching all over for the dog tags, like the game. The weapon selection is a lot of fun if you're a history buff. Lots of the upgrades were conceptual designs never sent to the front. I love the Plumber's Delight so much. This piece of shit pipe won World War II, and it probably only got a couple thousand soldiers killed by jamming. Look at this dumbass thing. That era made truly so many weird guns. Raid's levels are brilliantly designed. There's a surprising variety with that Payday flavor randomization. Hey, wait a minute, that's the jewelry store. Some maps get reused, but they're clever about it, creating mini campaigns with this big Berlin stage that you travel near and far in your big red car. Some missions let you blow up bridges and dirigibles, and then the game confidently reuses those destroyed assets for other missions. What starts as a resource-saving measure can end as a linear in-world narrative. Ilya and his crew are some of the realest to ever do it for low-budget, high-concept level design, seriously. Man, but seeing the way Ilya talks about the game, I don't think he was specifically trying for a Payday audience.
I mean, we tried to use the fact that there's a lot of things in the Second World War that happened that people don't really know about. It's like, where's the Amber Room? You know, what happened in Han with the V2 rockets and who did this? And we tried to sort of put on our own story to this. It is a game where you steal stuff for your own good, but it's not the only thing you do. You actually help out in the war.
Meanwhile, Almir was out here literally saying, imagine if there was a game like Payday but in World War II. The lean on Payday 2's blockbuster success to try and promote Raid was coming from the business side, Starbreeze. By the way, this webpage is so cursed. A Raid World War II art asset with Payday 2's logo and buy button right next to Payday 3 updates. Raid is too Payday for its own good, in part because it has a different inspiration altogether. After the heist success, Ilya mentions to Bo in passing about his own idea for a game, codenamed Project Tokyo. Whoa, what'd you mean by that? But while it's got Payday in its blood, he was citing his own cinematic heist inspiration. Kelly's Heroes. Look, I already researched World War II a truly unnecessary amount in preparation for its launch back in the day, so I would know what I was talking about and wouldn't get some important historical context wrong. But I draw the line at watching 2.5 hours of Clint Eastwood. So sorry that I didn't see your inspiration beyond some clips, but kudos for wearing it on... Well, I was gonna say wearing it on your sleeve, but in the context of Nazis, I don't know if... Bo loved it, being as Militech-pilled as he was, so in 2015, he gave LGL the green light. But in doing so, he was essentially encouraging it to become a Payday franchise spin-off. Which is kinda tricky given the subject matter, don't you think?
Burn the enemy alive.
You're not exactly gonna get an official Kelly's Heroes crossover. Oh god, I bet they tried, huh? Maybe part of why this game didn't take was the tonal dissonance. Seeing comedy Hitler freak out when you finish a raid is cute, really, this actor was going off, but Nazi gold is a persistent player currency? Making it something valuable, desirable to attain beyond the abstract of stealing in a film which ends, but rather a progression currency you hoard and spend to unlock cosmetics and fancy trinkets? That takes on a new meaning. It's a little tough to ask the player to show off their wealth and success with the melted down valuables of the victims of the Holocaust. Because, yes, that's what a lot of Nazi gold was. Some of it was gold Germany already had, some of it was in countries they'd occupied, all of it was thrown into vats to melt down with pocket watches, lighters, teeth of the innocent they'd slaughtered, cooled and hardened with a swastika embedded on the front. Stack those Nazi gold bars high, look on your accomplishments as you consider what costumes to purchase. Hey, it's one thing to be hurting the bastards directly, gunning them down, financial harm, anything to beat them. Use the gold to win the war, right?
So if a little Nazi gold happens to go missing, no questions will be asked.
It's another thing to spend that cursed coin on a golden toilet. Just because your characters are morally gray does not mean you should encourage your players to be during out-of-narrative mechanics. Nazi gold is a bonkers-ass player-side currency. Profiting from hoarding it doesn't interest me. Really, I don't know why Switzerland does it, but I can't hate too much. It's so easy for me to sit here and go, wow, cringe from the States, but this shit isn't about me. Kelly's Heroes was filmed almost entirely in Croatia, where LGL is at. There was a sort of Kelly's Heroes reenactment airsoft tournament held in the village where the movie was shot, the same year Raid came out. and Ilya's based in Croatia, but he's originally from the bordering nation of Bosnia. Then he wound up in Sweden for a while because he was fleeing the Yugoslav wars, a whole series of conflicts that have roots spreading all the way back to World War II.
We had to move to Sweden because we fled from the war.
We actually didn't know where we are going. It split up and then we ended up in Sweden, in Göteborg.
This shit matters, directly affects people who are still alive and making games today. I did my best to help promote Raid when I was still willing to be an influencer in that way. It was being hyped up in that time I was between housing, with shitty internet that made downloading a game a commitment, let alone doing live influencer events for it. So I really had to go out of my way to get involved in the game. They made a special exception for me getting an early copy, and I'm still grateful. My video critiquing the game's beta was pointed to directly by the developers as a good example of community feedback. Some of the stuff I suggested made it right into the game. And I remember Payday fans being pissed, calling me a shill for defending the game pre-launch. Those were my very first death threats, if memory serves, and then when the title didn't take off, I backed off. By that time in 2017, I was already second-guessing how invested in this tech hype cycle I could be. Adding another game I wasn't as enthusiastic about to the retinue made me question what I was even doing in the first place. I can't blame Raid for that though, that was my fucking problem. But when it came to promoting the game, Starbreeze took the Payday approach of celebrities and influencers, and I just don't know what they expected. It's a World War II game, man. Pretty hard to make monetizable videos about. You are splintering Payday's fan base on purpose for a game that's different but not different enough and shares a mechanical identity, meant to satisfy the same craving. At best, they cannibalize each other, but more likely just one title emerges as the popular pick. There's a reason those combination Pizza Hut Taco Bells share floor space, yeah? People are coming to you for similar kinds of slop. Why spend the money and man-hours developing infrastructure for two separate units meant to share clientele, especially when it's the same company managing all of it in the first place? Starbreeze didn't let the game exist as its own merely Payday-inspired thing, nor did they lean into their install base and just make it a game mode for Payday 2. That could have kickstarted Payday as a platform, if that's what they really want. It's not a hot take that Raid World War II would have been more successful as a DLC, but it's LGL's game. It's not fair to force it to be Payday. I really wish this game could have been published by Starbreeze either 3 years earlier or 3 years later, when they would have been more willing to let it be its own thing. But to make a separate release, it needed a unique identity, upgraded engine, and fresh coat of paint. Being set in World War II ain't enough. That's uniquely challenging to advertise, even with Monty Python's Flying Jackass on your side. Why not something much safer? The apocalypse! Yeah, while Ilya and his crew at Lion Game Lion step back, the Overkill label strikes while the iron's comfortably cooling off on the Walking Dead franchise. I have not watched or read a single frame of The Walking Dead. Sorry, Dad, I know you're really into it, but I prefer human interest stories of the best of people in tragic times, not the worst of them. My closest touch point is the Telltale game with Michael Madsen in it. I had even less enthusiasm for promoting Overkill's The Walking Dead than I did Raid. Walking Dead was announced in 2014, slated to be released in 2016, came out in final quarter 2018, and then was discontinued from sale in first quarter 2019. If there is a title that embodies everything Ulf, Simon, and even Ilya couldn't stand about Bo's visions of games, it's this one. A licensed investor promise that burned a comical amount of cash, worked developers to illness from exhaustion, and existed for little reason else than the pitch of Payday guys make a Walking Dead game being abstractly interesting. Imagine a co-op shooter like Payday, but with zombies in it. They were even planning to put Dallas in the game originally, the masked face of Payday himself. One of Walking Dead's devs mentioned early on that the game was set in Washington, D.C. as a, quote, egocentric way to pay tribute to the Payday franchise. But then Almir crawled out of the woodwork to say, no, it's in D.C. because we wanted to infiltrate the capital and take over the military again, like anyone would. Bo promised an ever-expansive universe, constantly changing world, all kinds of shit that might impress an investor but makes coders want to key your car. All while trying to claim it's an indie game, by the way. Fuck you. Then he'd play Dying Light over the weekend, come back to work and say, hey, let's do that instead. You can't just make up random cool-sounding shit for games that have nothing to do with each other but aesthetic and then assume your team will figure it out working in somebody else's franchise. That's the exact strategy that bankrupted your last studio. The Diesel engine, which is what Walking Dead started development on, was upheld by engineers who had already left to start their own companies. So Bo panicked, delayed the game, and spent $8 million in shares on a new engine that somebody convinced him could do virtual reality, only to find out he got scammed. Conned. The Valhalla engine was a bullshit promise that didn't amount to more than rendering software. Bo had gotten so disconnected from game development that he didn't understand the difference. To compare it to another field, imagine you're in a band and your boss says they've spent $8 million on recording equipment, only for you to get to the studio and see what he's purchased is a set of fancy speakers. They aren't designed to record anything, only play back the audio you're recording. You can't develop on a renderer, you can only render in it. So, Overkill stalled another 2 years by using the Valhalla renderer to produce art assets for fancy CG trailers outsourced to a studio called Goodbye Kansas. But with the game stalled in development and no clear creative vision, they couldn't commit too hard to any specific plot beats. So the final in-game cutscenes are just these hardcore Henry-style vague visualizations of red and black nothings. The kind of thing you'd make if you had a renderer but no engine, as the developers pleaded with their piece of shit boss to just suck it up and pay for Unreal. Starbreeze had done that before, but it was years out of date and they had to renegotiate for Unreal 4. Bo had already given up an entire third of profits from the future Payday sequel and drove off the majority of its potential creatives. Starbreeze couldn't afford to cheap out on development again, not with a major license on the line like this one. Finally, Anderson caved and got Unreal, only a cool year before the game's launch. 1 single year to learn how to use a new engine and build a new game on it. Crunch just like the old days. But hey, the hype train is contractually obligated to have no brakes.
You look at it initially,
Can I
you
stop
go...
you real quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Keep
sure.
that thought. In the chat, Brutal Titty said consoles are trash. Fuck yourself and fuck your mother. Fuck yourself and fuck your mother. Go ahead, sorry.
Walking Dead crashes a lot, runs like shit, and has some strange looking bugs, but it arrives there from being blatantly unfinished, from first-time Unreal developers trying to iterate on a gigantic promise of a game in barely any time at all. It wasn't because of Diesel. I guess you could argue it's Valhalla's fault, but that's not even a real engine. It didn't purchase itself. Overkill's Dead Game Walking is a textbook example of a game failing due to mismanagement, of an idea destroyed by the guy in charge being a fuck-up, a relentlessly self-aggrandizing cunt. I could give you the whole story, but as a matter of fact, I already did that over 5 years ago when I made a video about this whole thing. Bo is an asshole! And hey, while I've got a chance to set the record straight, let me just give a shout out to Red Archer Live. If you're watching this, man, you've been making videos in these communities a long time. You still are. But at the time, I didn't know you had talked about The Walking Dead's development before my piece. I didn't mean to step on your shoes, sorry about that. Seems you're doing the influencer circuit for Payday 3 now. Not saying you sold out, obviously. I will ask though, are you as fed up with it as I was? I'll talk more about this later, but when you're an influencer dependent on the success of a product to yourself succeed, it's frustrating when the game is faltering, especially with this fan base. For my part, before that investigative piece, I released a video about Walking Dead's closed beta where I was severely critical, certainly too mean about the state of the game. I was bitter at Starbreeze, sure, but knowing the circumstances it was developed under now, I wish I had bit my tongue. Those poor bastards were celebrating even getting a launchable program out the door, and there I was going, where's my mouse sensitivity slider? But for a game that launched just weeks later, it was in a terrible state. Payday fans had already made their mind up about it, and critics didn't give it the time of day. I already reviewed Walking of the Dead Overkill, but still, here's the gist of it. It was online only, had a tiny spattering of levels which are reused several times over to pad length, asset recycling as a limit of acceptability, and it's this. For a supposed zombie survival/resource gathering game, much of the focus is around waves of gun combat with other humans, including enemies straight out of Payday. If Walking Dead wanted to be a survival game which escalates into a shooter, like how Payday goes from stealth to loud, there needed to be gradual middle steps between the tiers of alarm the walkers have. The escalation is very steep. The challenge and paths through levels are balanced around the assumption of a 4-player party, with later maps locked to higher difficulties. Makes it even harder for any single Walking Dead superfan to give the game a shot. The combat goes from a spattering of zombies to clunky stealth shooter to mediocre horde shooter based on how much noise you make, with a comical number of traps and weapons which break if they're breathed on wrong. All the mechanisms of a broader survival game are present, crafting, looting, rescuing survivors, but only nominally, surface level ripples existing to keep one another propped up in an illusion of depth. Whereas the reality of the gameplay is camp defense, menu-based side quests, camp defense, tiny maps made longer by a series of convolutedly locked doors and blown fuses, camp defense, menu-based side quest, repeat. Honestly, if any of this looks interesting to you, Back 4 Blood would go on to do a lot of what Walking Dead was trying for, but better. Not perfect, but it at least leans into being an arcadey horde shooter. Did you even notice that I used Back 4 Blood footage earlier? And if the grounded, scavenging survival elements are your preference, you're at no shortage of titles to try for that. Which is itself a problem. There's a plethora of visceral zombie games out there already. Walking Dead just couldn't elaborate on any of its ideas and didn't have the material to justify its cost, or indeed a paid season pass of content which never got a chance to manifest. Skybound pulled the Walking Dead license from Starbreeze in early 2019. Taking the game off sale forever. Hundreds of scrambling hours work and little more to show for it than a cobbled together first-person shooter tech demo. Dolled up in assets and theming Starbreeze no longer had the legal authority to use. Their stock price flatlined, their board was furious, the shareholders that were left were angrier still. And this time around, everyone could agree exactly whose fault it was. Bo Macho Guy Anderson. Now, Eurogamer has since been gobbled up by IGN, but they've done some truly incredible work over the years, including The Fall of Starbreeze by former editor-in-chief Wesley Yin Poole, who now does daily clickbait at IGN. I hope you're okay, bud. I've cited this article repeatedly for this and other videos, and I probably will again because it's packed to the brim with insane details. They got to interview Starbreeze employees directly. And here's a taste of what they had to say about Bo Anderson. This bro macho guy always felt like he was pushing way too hard and way too fast. He was very optimistic about a lot of things he definitely shouldn't have been. It was very easy to drink his Kool-Aid. Jiminy Jones! Bo's own employees were comparing him to a cult leader. This man should not be in charge of a fucking Kool-Aid kiosk, let alone a game development studio. He was certain virtual reality was going to be the future and wasted millions on that, brute forcing its basic functionality into Payday 2 and then promising the same for Walking Dead before pivoting to VR experiences when the audience didn't manifest itself. He told IP holders that his team could meet impossible deadlines and then blamed his team for failing to deliver, learning absolutely nothing from Grin's collapse. His family, friends, faculty, all thrown under the fucking hype train. Bo Anderson is a squawking sack of shit in a suit who you should never trust, never listen to, and never give the time of day. He's an abusive, backstabbing liar, desperate for the affection of celebrities he wishes he could have been. Bo has done incalculable damage to the standard of digital download games in the past decade. And when he was fired from his role as CEO of Starbreeze, he went, "You can't fire me, I quit." This stupid motherfucker was fired, let the story spread that he quit, and then when he was interviewed by the press said, "Yeah, they actually fired me. Can you believe it?" Now, I touch on this in the Walking Dead video, but the day he left Starbreeze, Bo Anderson sent an email out to all staff. I don't want to make a video just reading stuff from this article unabridged, so please go give it a read for yourself if you need any more proof of Bo's bullshit. But there's some stuff in here I think you all need to hear to really understand what things were like for Bo at this point, the kind of dinosaur he'd become. In short, the stock price is too low due to less sales, as our board put it, than expected, and too high costs than we could carry. Not sexy. Not cogent either. And as CEO, that is my fault, not matter what I tried or did. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the balls to have a vision and a will to create the future. Jesus Christ. Now lots of should-haves and would-haves pop up, and to that I say, go build your own company. Good luck to you. That's the solution to fucking everything, huh? If something doesn't work, just do the exact same thing again until it does. I decided that I will build an amazing games again. Will you? The problem was that he hadn't decided to build an amazing games. See, that's an important thing to decide to do. Maybe look into how many years it's supposed to take. I will miss a lot of you. Okay, that one's funny. I gotta give him that. I will miss a lot of you. Friends and colleagues. Being the CEO and sometimes producer designer makes you go from one corporate stiff meeting to a super creative, exciting one day per day. It's a true roller coaster. That sounds rough, man. Maybe stay in your fucking lane. The one thing that is amazing is to see your devs grow and mature into seasoned veterans. Some of you are like sons and daughters to me. You make me so proud. Seeing the way Bo treated his own brother, maybe he actually believes that. And then the very next line, I spent more time caring for you than my own children. What is wrong with you, you sick fuck? You care more about abusing employees than you do raising your damn kids? Personally though, I lost all my money, my family, hang on, lost? He lost his wife and kids? Not drove them away, he lost them, like they were forgotten. Or like it was someone else's doing, like his studio drove them away from their own lack of drive. I fucked up my family for this game, why didn't all of you? He lost, quote, my kids' custody through the toil of the last 2 to 3 years working 100-hour weeks for Starbreeze and keeping you devs paid and in the game. With less and less developers willing to put in the extra care in a product, it clearly limits the possible result of enough quality and time. This is a new era and I did not leave the old one and adapt in time. My fault. It's okay, it's new times. The Starbreeze staff was sickened by this. Even the people who weren't literally driven to illness from abuse. Anderson sees his children, his wife, his brother, his friends, and anyone who has ever loved him as pieces worth sacrificing in a great game of business, of winners, losers, and suckers. He's the winner, the human shrapnel left in his wake are the losers, and we, the players, are the suckers. There's a phrase associated with Bo Anderson in the Payday community, based off of a comment he made on a forum post of people asking for changes to flashbangs. We got those changes eventually, but the way he dismissed the criticism really stuck. Your opinion, my choice. I have to imagine he heard something similar from his first wife when she filed for divorce.
Buddy, new adventures await.
He's gonna do it again. Okay, so we wanted to talk about the crime game from 2023, right? Yeah, it's been a while since this video started, and I kinda lost track, so I go on internet and look up Crime Game 2023, and what are we looking at here?
Forget the past. That's the key. Try again. I look forward to it.
Crime Boss Rockay City is a strange video game, compellingly so. It came out the same year the game this video is supposed to be about did, but several months earlier. The first thing most people notice about it is the all-star celebrity cast of actors who would like to pay for healthcare in their latter years with some lower strain voiceover work. And good for them. Chuck Norris crawls out of his cave to sing his sweet music one last time with his sultry Texas Ranger tones.
Sky, fucking sky, you motherfucker.
Reviewers of this game, generally speaking, all had the same reaction. What the fuck is this almost Payday? Because it can't be ignored, Crime Boss is distractingly close to Payday's formula. The bank robberies, the drills, the stealth and crowd control, camera, security room, enemy types, loot bags, the whole 9 yards. Why am I talking about this? Payday has had clones for years. You might remember that incredibly popular Roblox knockoff, which kind of turned into its own thing over time, before Starbreeze sent a cease and desist. Crime Boss Rockay City is more than just a Payday clone. It's also Bo Anderson's fault. In-Game Studios are developers based in Brno in the Czech Republic. They got their start in 2021, made up of industry vets who worked on Viet Cong way back in the day, and plenty of other games like Kingdom Come Deliverance and Mafia. In-Game Studios is owned by Werfte AB, and that company is founded and owned by Bo Anderson. Crime Boss was published by former Payday publishers 505 Games, the company that, under Bo's watch, gave up exclusive Payday publishing rights in exchange for 33% of Payday 3's earnings, royalties on Payday 2, and quite a bit of stock in Starbreeze. Now, 505 have always been a subsidiary of the Italian games publishing giant Digital Bros, who are also credited on Crime Boss. And It could be said that Digital Bros have taken quite an interest in Starbreeze, or perhaps have just taken it. It's all the same corporation at the top. Digital Bros either own or have financial stake in every part of both Crime Boss and Payday. And all of it can be tied back to the selfish, impulsive decisions of one Bo Anderson. Galleon Studios is Bo's very own sinking ship, staffed by Madam Anderson,
Fuck yourself and fuck your mother.
plus a whole slew of new recruits ready to set out to sea where there are no labor laws. Galleon moored itself on in-game shores in search of its payday, a voyage funded by royalties and sold stock through 505 and Digital Bros. From the outset, Crime Boss was Bo Anderson trying to make the clown game happen again. But this time with some DNA, you know what I'm saying? Hey, bring out the Payday girls! Bo Anderson liked paying celebrities to hang out with him so much that he drove Starbreeze to reconstruction in lieu of bankruptcy, and then used that opportunity as leverage to do the exact same thing again.
What a fucking jerk-off.
In-game cited Crime Boss's developmental vision as an immersive, single-player experience, but with uncompromising cooperation and durability thanks to multiplayer, and emphasis on sound or distinctive music. To me, that sounds like someone who started describing a new game and ended describing Payday. He just wants someone, anyone, to make him his weird little crime game so he can brag to the colleagues he has left about hanging out with Mr. Blonde. It's all for his own personal clout. That's it. Anderson jumped from Payday to Rockay City like Aiden Ross going from hip-hop to Andrew Tate. And he's just as likely to be what finally gets someone arrested. He's here for the vibes of being a gangbanger without putting himself back in the line of fire. I bet he also agrees that cops are basically just a gang in their own right, but since that's the popular counterculture punk opinion, he acts as though it's because he's edgy. But let's be real, a C-suite cumsucker who was investigated by Swedish police for insider trading can pretty easily get on board the ACAB. That one might actually get me in trouble. The police cleared Bo Anderson of any wrongdoing. He did not commit fraud at Starbreeze. His leaving the country to move to Spain was entirely unrelated. But Crime Boss failing to earn acclaim wasn't because people knew Bo Anderson was responsible. That shit wasn't common knowledge until he started weaseling his way into the game's Discord and YouTube communities. Bo angrily defends himself in the comments of Crime Boss YouTube poops. This man abandoned his family for this. I think a lot of people dismissed Rockay City as a video game too soon, myself included. But can you really blame us? On launch, half this game was confusingly broken and the other half misspelled. Now, this is an interesting entry by our buggy, shitty, crashy metric. At least in my experience, Rockay City appears to have successfully pulled down the crash slider, but in doing so, cranked up the bugs and shit sliders. This game runs the worst out of any title I'll be talking about today. It's almost impressive how terribly this game performs on otherwise capable hardware, yet confidently has graphics settings up the wazoo. By cinematic, they mean 24 frames a second. If you've got dual RTX running an SLI or some POS, go off, I guess. Even cranking settings down to a minimum didn't help performance, and since it's peer-to-peer, that means unless you're hosting, the game's nearly always lagging behind. This footage is from playing with the lobby host on Steam Deck. Compatible my ass. Crime Boss breaks in bizarre ways. Glitches that feel like they could only be the result of attempting several times to implement features, none of which work right, but never going back and removing the old attempts, just stacking code on top of itself completely unedited. Like if L. Ron Hubbard were a programmer, this is the code he would write. Call that shit tech. But I didn't encounter a single crash. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I've got to be honest about that. Let it not be said that this game isn't trying to work. It can actually be a little too good at running. By which I mean it has protections in place to prevent you from force quitting it in Task Manager. It's trying to get you to commit to the randomized outcomes of its roguelike elements. I think this part in particular is what confused most players on launch. I mean, the game looks like such a Payday clone that nobody was expecting a territory conquering mechanic, or the random characters, or the slice of a horrible life cutscenes.
The majority of the involved personnel were casualties.
Yeah, all I'm hearing about is demons and goddamn detonations.
Demons? Well, there was quite a bit of his merchandise dispersed.
Yeah, and the detonations?
Accurate description of events.
Oh, Christ!
An actual intent of game flow is there, but it's not clear. It takes a couple hours, frankly several hours, to work out this game's strange quirks. What anyone's goals or motivations are. What it really means when it says words.
The son of a bitch is on a witch hunt.
I'm just a simple businessman, you know?
It feels like a game made in a universe where Polybius is real, the same one Radical Heights takes place in. A world in which the most important shooter of the 2000s was 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. Crime Boss heard the meme that it's not racist to make fun of Italians and said, "Oh, fettuccine."
Hey, you, greaseball, make me a pizza. Hey, make me a pizza, you greasy fucking wop.
If you ask them if it's a pastiche, they'd ask if that comes with a side of sauce. This game was made by guys who heard Wolf Totem once and decided that Mongolians are fun now. So they put it in their 90s game despite that song releasing in 2018. But this game doesn't care about making sense beyond half-remembered action movie plots. It's as much Payday as it is Mafia or Viet Cong, or indeed other games like GTA, Saints Row, all packaged into XCOM's formula, two distinct game states which inform one another. One is a setup stage, a troop and resource management simulator, and the other is the execution of those spent resources, the core gameplay. Except instead of a turn-based action economy strategy game, it's a goofy iced 'em up. And then when the game cuts back to the story-centric menus, instead of an alien invasion, it's a robot takeover. It's the 5th Stallone sequel that goes straight to DVD, including scenes that were cut from the theater because they went all in on the rape jokes.
I'd like to see that bastard drop the fucking soap.
It's the film that you find out a decade later the lead actress was repeatedly sexually harassed on the set of, and then dudes will argue it somehow actually enhanced the performance for another decade still. Rockay City is raunchy, horny, gross, often plainly racist, homophobic, and sexist as an aesthetic. Bo calls it reliving the 90s but with no politics, which just means anything I think is icky. That said, the game's writing seems to be a parody of that entire genre of media, a very common one in the 90s. American entertainment as portrayed to the world is defined by its confident, boisterous offensiveness. This game is something of a reflection of that, just not on it.
And the flag was still there.
It's satire. Except irony is itself an aesthetic of modern-day shitbags, and as a result, the people this game is making fun of can enjoy it without realizing they're the punchline. Bo can get 200 lonely hours in his perfect little game which runs on his PlayStation, which must mean it runs good enough, and not understand that he's not the Candyman, he's the addict stockbroker being taken for a ride.
Because, you know, I've heard you get more miles when you do your pounds.
You'll see.
When I stopped trying to take Crime Boss seriously, I very quickly realized it wasn't taking itself seriously. Rockay City is the paradise Kid Rock would imagine reading The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelos. If this title had VR support, Palmer Luckey would abandon his life of war crimes to stay forever in Maximum Miami. Travis Baker, the main character, is basically Archer in the Archer Vice season. He doesn't care about anything anyone's trying to tell him unless he sees the angle. He wants to slide in there, be a badass, and make some money while sterilizing his liver and ogling at babes.
We got the cake.
I think Michael Madsen realized at some point this project was a joke. Like either that it wasn't worth taking seriously or that nobody on it was. In that clip I found of him earlier when I was talking about Walking Dead, he tells the interviewer why he got into video game acting in the first place.
I have 5 sons, and obviously, you know, they're into gaming, and my younger boys, they love it. And to hear their dad's voice in a game, and they get a big kick out of that.
It's funny, he got into games so his kids could see him more. Bo got into games so he could avoid seeing them at all. Oh shit, he got divorced too. Damn, wonder what happened. Oh wow, that's not funny. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. This whole game is divorced from reality, and half the voice lines the actors sound fed up, and the other half they're laughing at the material. Plot beats from crime serials played on loop after midnight, infecting the dreams in a writer's sleep.
What the mother of all motherfuckers is this?
Actually, let's zoom in on that for a second. I'm talking a lot of shit, but these cutscenes aren't incompetent, they're overconfident. The end result of assigning the incredibly complex task of make all the cutscenes to a single improv comedian. Kirby Joe Grubb II has got a history of writing and producing media. And I don't want to sound like I'm hating on the guy. This is a ton of work, really way too much work to give to one person. All of these scenes could be good if the acting was better, but the celebs certainly weren't being paid enough for that, and Kirby was so excited to act alongside them, he didn't do a great job directing.
There are no manners, no ethics, no honor.
None, sir.
Well, we will have to teach them both some.
Yeah. Manners.
The motion capture is stiff because it was done in post by Grubb himself. When Crime Boss makes me laugh, it's not for the reasons it thinks it is. I'm laughing at it, not with it. The writing isn't clever enough to be commentary, nor stupid enough to be completely ignorable. It doesn't exactly feel first draft, but rather top of mind. Look, I think a lot of this game would be funnier if it was improv. If these characters were sudden inventions by professional comedians on an episode of Whose Line. But when presented as a final product without the emphasis of spontaneity, it's very fucking weird. Everybody talks like Donald Trump, but moves like Joe Biden. Hey, can you tell when that joke was written? This shit is whack, but the notorious KGG doesn't deserve all that hate. Sure, he thinks he can do everything himself, but the games industry predatorily abuses this kind of labor. We only have to pay one person to handle all the cutscenes? Will he do overnights? I'm certain he worked very hard on all of these cutscenes, and they would have turned out better if he had more people. Improv is a communal comedy. It's his thing. He even improvised a speech in character at the Game Awards.
We're here to set a slightly different tone for the trailer you're about to watch.
You see, this trailer here, well, it's a little different than the rest of these trailers you're seeing tonight. This one's a little bit dangerous. So the boss wanted to come out here. Wow.
Anyways, if you recognize that man on the left, by the by, that's Payday and the Marvel Cinematic Universe's own Damien Poitier, Chains' actor since the second game. In Crime Boss, he plays your voice over the radio, Nasara.
As your first mission under my command, there is no room for improvisation. One of you will slip around to the back of the shop.
One of the few decent performances. I guess Bo liked Damien enough and wanted him back, though he still refers to him as Chains, even on alleged business social media LinkedIn. Thing is, Damien's not just an actor, he's a writer on this game too. My theory is that he accepted the role, then read the script and went, hang on, do you mind? Do you need some help?
I'm not certain. Doesn't feel right.
Doesn't feel right?
It is simply too quiet.
Oh, fuck you, Sarah. Too quiet. You know what I think? I think you need to get laid.
I cannot, in good conscience, recommend Crime Boss Rockay City for its writing, presentation, or downright obsession with ass. And the man responsible is the worst piece of shit I've ever had the displeasure of writing about. I cannot recommend giving Bo Anderson any more money. But I also can't look these developers in the eye and say they didn't make a pretty entertaining video game. The updates have seriously improved upon the experience and fixed most of the typos. Despite everything, Crime Boss has got some genuinely interesting approaches to the roguelike genre. The AI is out of date, but commendable, Graw style. The missions that crop up in single player are randomized, with the paths to get there being alternative. There's some fun ideas here. Finding a data disk to unlock intel on a heist, slashing cop car tires to delay their response. There are multiple layers of both RNG and player-side decision-making meant to keep the outcomes varied, and the game rewards you for failure with alternate story beats and unlocks. Then there's the more standard levels, using a big Miami map split into small, purpose-built arenas with clear objective spots, chunky rooms, and plenty of versatility. Buildings grow familiar with reused and remixed assets, but so does every roguelike, it's fine. Crime Boss is a game out of time. Clunky and dated shooter controls comparable to COD Modern Warfare, the original one, yet stiffer. But I miss the old games, don't you? This almost feels like when niche developers make honest-to-goodness new NES or Sega Genesis titles and release them on hardware today. But like, for the PlayStation 3? Crime Boss Rockay City is 2023's greatest PlayStation 3 title. And no, let me just say right now, I'm not claiming Crime Boss is a better game than Payday 3. Cold take, it's not. However, it is currently the easier game to pick up and get into. Which is crazy, because fucking look at it! This ain't a diesel engine game, it's built on Unreal 4, but as Bo should have learned from Walking Dead, Unreal is not some magical solution to bugs, performance, and crashing. Rockay was a disaster on launch, and everybody assumed that was the end of it. But call it insidious or ingenious, this game took the devil's bargain on a year of Epic Store exclusivity to essentially earn itself some paid beta testing. With a bunch of updates, Crime Boss went from confusingly unplayable to shockingly competent, reinventing its online multiplayer to hew closer to Payday before going for a bargain bin Steam launch. All DLC included, limited time offer. You know, I'm looking here and on Steam they don't advertise the celebrities pretty much anywhere, save for the old trailers. Maybe that's because the only thing people knew about this game was that it had horrible celebrity cameos. Great investment, Bo. Christ, his fingerprints are all over the shit. You know, playing all these shooty crime games back to back, save for one, something jumped out to me. It's glaringly obvious now. Crime Boss started as a Payday prototype, right? Or at least a Payday-like. Specifically, one built by Lion Game Line. That's Ilya's studio. They're still technically at Starbreeze, but I'm not sure what they're currently cooking up. The Raid World War II guys designed Crime Boss's basic gameplay. Look, there they are in the credits. LGL, first prototype. Rockhay buried that shit near the end of a 22-minute scroll, almost like they're trying to hide it. Drown it out in a sea of names, warding off the curious with this talisman of a tune. While Payday is the obvious comparison, Crime Boss really does play more like Raid. The bullet-spongy enemies, the melee combat, the stealth, the design sensibilities here hew closer to LGL's work than Overkill's. Here's my thinking. This is speculation, but go with me on this. At some point in the past decade, Lion Game Lion was tasked with trying to make a video game in the Unreal Engine, be it Payday, Raid, or something else altogether. They gave this a decent effort, got a clunky prototype together, but whatever project this was going towards was cancelled or went a different direction. So they've got this working prototype laying around. Maybe Ilya mentions it in passing on a call with Bo, or someone at 505 Games gets a whiff. They're still deeply invested in Starbreeze, and they're the ones publishing Crime Boss Rockhay City. 505 Games, or someone working on Bo's behalf, contacts LGL and offers to take the prototype off their hands. Maybe for money or stock, maybe as a favor, or maybe Ilya just couldn't be fucked with it anymore. Then this gets furnished to in-game studios and incorporated into the roguelike concept they were kicking around. Add a pile of turbocharged Turbo Squid guns, outsource your models to 1001 studios, and you've got yourself a heisting game. Can't find a competent composer? Needle drops. Pay to play other people's songs. Body Count, Bon Jovi, Prodigy. What an ingenious advertisement strategy. Think of all the influencers playing your game who will have to turn that shit off or get their videos taken down. So instead we get a SoundCloud-ass loop of... A prototype is the core of the product. It's a massive deal. There wouldn't be a game without it. But at the same time, without this other studio coming in to build the rest of the game around it, the prototype wouldn't exist as more than a tech demo, a proof of concept. For those who know the story, I'd call Lion Game Lion a creator of Crime Boss like I'd call Turtle Rock Studios a creator of Left 4 Dead. Probably even less so, which I guess would make in-game studios be Valve in this comparison. That's a bit generous. The main difference is the strained, tenuous relationship of all the men involved. So I don't want to shit on these developers anymore. Their community is rancid enough as it is. And all of it for the masturbatory whims of one Bo Loff Anderson. A man that don't often say anything, another fucking lie, save for when Sean Connery dies and he needs the world to know he was his role model, which, yeah, that scans. As part of my job, I have spent truly so much of the past year reading dumbass LinkedIn posts from always online business boys looking for comfort. And nobody posts cringe the way Bo Anderson posts cringe. He's so damn proud of himself for Crime Boss making a comeback, despite it flopping in the first place due to his decisions. He wrote an article about how developers should get into AI because economy, which amounts to less humans costs less money. Have you seen Terminator? And this shit is sandwiched between him complaining that Gen X doesn't get enough love because kids make fun of Metallica, and literally offering $2,000 cash to anyone who can get him in a room with musky daddy Elon. Hey Bo? No politics is, itself, a political opinion. It is a deference of leadership to a system which isn't actively hostile to you, and it lets you pay to cosplay another country's customs when you decide the one you were born in has gone woke. Think your kids are impressed you paid Yondu to say some slurs? When's the last time you even spoke to them, huh? Look, Bo, I know you name search yourself, so if you're watching this and getting upset, hey, go text one of your ex-wives about it. I'm just as likely to respond as they are. Take my $16 and go get your toes sucked by Tarantino or whatever will make you happy, you fucking reptile, you worm of a man. Fuck you. Alright, let's wrap things up on the goddamn Andersons. These fucking Swedish men have been all I've been able to think about for the past couple of weeks. We're supposed to be talking about a game they didn't even make! Because yeah, Bo's done and dusted with Starbreeze, but that doesn't mean Ulf Andersson or Simon Viklund are coming back. Why would they? Any publisher they might try to work with could wind up leading right back to Starbreeze anyways. 10 Chambers has got its own thing going on. No publishers, just games taking as long as they take. GTFO was a survival horror co-op game they released back in 2021 that I had a great time with in alpha. It did pretty well on launch, has a solid community, very focused on team-based stealth and coordination. I couldn't keep playing GTFO though. All the flashing and flickering and high-pitched sounds meant to invoke sensory overload did just that in me. I get a migraine trying to start a level. The actual game itself was so interesting, I would have loved to engage with it further. But it's trapped behind a layer of bullshit that made me put it down before I even got a chance to really engage with it. Now, as I'm working on this video, 10 Chambers have got a new project in the pipe, Den of Wolves. Ulf said about it, quote, "I'm back on that heist shit, basically." Good for you, man. Cyberpunk robbers working for whatever company pays them the best, maybe sometimes forced to toil under a corporate entity who threatens your livelihood otherwise. I'm Mr. Bowman. Sounds like he's got plenty of inspiration. And if anyone from 10 Chambers happens to be watching, please make your next game accessible to players with sensory processing issues. Settings to remove tinnitus rings, flickering lights, flashes from red to blue as Cyberpunk is wont to do. Really though, no matter what happens, I hope Den of Wolves does great. I wish you all at 10 Chambers nothing but the best. And the Lion Game Line guys too. I hope you go on to make something that Bo doesn't fuck up. Machine Games, Fat Shark, all of these studios that have their roots as Starbreeze or Grin's leftovers. The director of Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, Josef Fares, went on to make and star in one of my favorite co-op games of all time, A Way Out.
Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck you!
One of the best level designers Payday 2 ever had, Jason Mojica, aka General Vivi. He worked on Yacht Heist, Brooklyn Bank, Murky Station, and a bunch more. He went on to develop levels for Proteus, an excellent boomer shooter with secret-packed, clever-ass maps. These people have so much more to offer when Starbreeze isn't trying to turn their games into fintech platforms. The people who originally created Payday, the Petrosiks, the Viklunds, the Andersons, are all gone. And the franchise they've left behind is a messy legacy of bullshit infrastructure, awkward relationships, expensive licensing, and old contracts that lock Starbreeze into giving an entire third of their next entry to the publisher of their competitor! But they're not technically competitors! Not really! The only competition here is class infighting. It's all in service of the same handful of jagovs at the top. They're called Digital Bros. They're literally just tech bros. Who gives a fuck anymore? These games have no passion behind them. They can't. Not the way these companies make them. They're content units sold like cultural events, developed with the abandoned assets of ex-employees forced out of the industry because they couldn't grind with a grid. Given all of this, a foundation of fintech and folly, is there a reality in which Payday 3 could work?
I'm on. I'm just waiting on, when the servers kick back in. Now, when the servers go down, it's a good and a bad sign. One bad sign is that people can't play. The good sign is so many people are so anxious to play that they outdid your expectations now.
And for the vast majority of buyers and Game Passers, on launch, Payday 3 was literally unplayable. Even by its own developers, live on camera. How the fuck did this happen? And furthermore, why didn't they anticipate this would happen?
We cannot continue making Payday 3 without you. That is the truth. We cannot continue making Payday 3 if you do not support us. That is a fact. You cannot be one of the heisters that go, yeah, I'll check back in a year's time or in 3 years' time, We need you now.
$40 million. That's how much Payday 3 is worth to 505 Games. Starbreeze made a promise. I hope you all understand what I've been trying to tell you by now. Payday 3 isn't unique. Starbreeze crunches out another unfinished tech demo of cobbled-together assets from previous unfinished tech demos the same way they've always done. Since they were strapped for cash and resources, Starbreeze, the supposedly independent game house, went to a publisher for Payday 3. Just not 505 Games. No, they saddled up with Deep Silver. But that doesn't mean they're square with 505, Contractual obligations are a bit more volatile to break than fan promises, aren't they? Look, I'll get to Payday 3's launch another day, but this information is time sensitive, so it takes priority. While researching this game's circumstances, I stumbled across a discrepancy in Starbreeze's finances that, no matter how many times I checked, was still unresolved. And I don't think I'm the only person to notice these things, but perhaps the only to realize what it all means put together. Or maybe I'm just crazy. Hear me when I say, I am not a financial expert. I am not a financial anything. I'm not good with money. I'm terrible at math. I have no training in any fiscal field whatsoever. What I am good at is digging up old PDFs from forgotten embeds and parsing out the intentions behind businessmen's actions. At least I like to think so. When I researched the Trevor Project, the conclusions I drew in the first part about how ridiculously that corporation was operating turned out to be spot on. So know that what I'm about to say is not coming from a business perspective. It's from a human being. I'm only human, and I might be wrong. But do y'all want to know why I think Starbreeze has gotten desperate? Why they seem, as others have called them, greedier? Do you want to know why Allmir is worried Payday 3 might not exist in a couple years' time? Well, thanks to that stupid-ass deal Bo let happen, Starbreeze owes 33% of Payday 3's revenue after development and marketing costs to 505 Games, or more accurately, their parent company, Digital Bros. Now, that seems like an almost impossibly sweetheart deal, right? The actual publisher, Deep Silver, gets half the game's take, but Digital Bros still gets an entire third for nothing? DB would already profit just from owning stock if the game sold well. That deal can't possibly hold. How would the game ever make money? Epic's cut, Valve's cut, server and licensing fees. What money is even left? There's no way this deal can last forever. But it doesn't. As I've said, that number has a cap, $40 million. Once Payday 3 has made Digital Bros $40 million, however long that takes, then they'll leave Payday alone. Right? I wouldn't be so sure. Currently, Digital Bros have quite the stake in Starbreeze, hovering around 40% voting power. Other investors have to be on board with Digital Bros to get most things done. They have the majority portion of shares compared to any other shareholders, but that's not complete control, is it? They aren't quite definitionally the majority shareholder. They would need 51% of the vote for that. Currently, it is possible for Digital Bros to be overruled. Like if DB suggested something asinine, such as let's jettison the Payday franchise, the rest of the board could just say no, and the matter would be settled. However, were Digital Bros to suddenly own, say, tens of millions more dollars in voting shares, well, that might just push them over the finish line, give them complete control over the company to do with as they pleased. There's no crime being committed here. I cannot stress that enough. All of this, at least as an outsider looking in, is above board. Digital Bros have converted old Starbreeze debts into shares before. In fact, that's part of how they got so much control of the company. But those debts were always convertible to shares. This $40 million figure is different. I don't have the full contract in front of me, but as far as I can tell, it's not a loan that Starbreeze needs to pay back, but rather an obligation. A promise to make Payday 3 profitable, to the point of, in theory anyways, grossing at the absolute least $120 million. A third of that makes 40 mil, which goes to DB, and boom, obligation met. But what would happen if Digital Bros lost confidence that Payday 3 could ever make that much money? It's a game that costs money to run. I'll get to this more another day, but think about the servers. That's an annual multi-million-dollar charge. Payday 3 cannot just subsist on its own and earn passive income like Payday 2 can. What would happen if, say, Starbreeze promised Digital Bros they would be done with their reconstruction phase by, end of year 2024? If Digital Bros then decided to hold very firm to this deadline, December of this year, and Starbreeze didn't pay out, what then? Now, Starbreeze says they've already paid off all their debts from the reconstruction, but that was before Payday 3 launched, which could be argued technically creates a new obligation for them. After Payday 3 released, it made back development costs, which means they're now on the hook for payments to Digital Bros. But Starbreeze confirmed none of this $40 million had been paid out yet in their annual report for 2023. I've checked each report since then, and maybe I've missed it, but as far as I can tell, as of November 11th, 2024, Starbreeze still hasn't paid anything out. I also cannot find Digital Bros getting a single cent of these royalties they're supposed to be earning from Payday 3. All I can find is them converting old debts into stock, keeping their controlling shares near 40%. For a while there, they were strategically keeping themselves below a third of ownership to avoid triggering a mandatory takeover bid. But it seems they've blown right past that since. Maybe the rules have changed. Or perhaps they're open to interpretation, as according to Digital Bros' consolidated financial statements, Digital Bros and Starbreeze have had a little bit of a disagreement over the terms of the contract which granted Payday 2 rights to Starbreeze. Digital Bros has now allocated 1.2 million euros for arbitration costs against Starbreeze, just in case. This is my theory, and hear me right. Theory. I think that if Payday 3 hasn't paid out at least part of this $40 million to Digital Bros by the end of this December, or otherwise proven they will eventually be able to start paying, then there's gonna be some changes at Starbreeze. Not immediately, but look. Under Bo Anderson's watch in 2016, that 33% deal got inked. After he's gone, in 2020, Digital Bros buys out all the Starbreeze shares another developer called Smilegate were holding, furnished through Varvtra Anderson Bo. Digital Bros cited the revenue-sharing deal 505 had cut back then and claimed they had the potential to, quote, earn out of up to $40 million on 33% of net revenues on the upcoming Payday 3. Now, where am I getting this December deadline? Well, this was from one of the times they turned an outstanding loan into shares in 2023. Quote, Digital Bros decided to support Starbreeze's strategic growth and balance sheet strengthening, enabling the anticipated settlement of all the residual obligations coming from the Starbreeze reconstruction plan in advanced respect to the original deadline of December 2024. Starbreeze claimed to be free of all their debts a few months after this, but Digital Bros and Starbreeze disagree on the wording of that $40 million contract, don't they? These two things could be unrelated, but they all paint a bigger picture of Digital Bros wanting their revenue one way or another. More recently, they cite all of their buying up and converting of debt into Starbreeze funny money as a series of significant events. And yet they continue to claim to have no real sway over Starbreeze as a company due to their governance structure, which would require control of the board to change, wouldn't it? Here are the facts I can confirm for certain. Digital Bros through 505 Games is still expecting Starbreeze to pay them $40 million from Payday 3. Payday 3 is not making tens of millions of dollars and costs a couple million a year to keep going. Payday 3, as it currently exists, is a live service game, online only, which means it would eventually cease to operate if the multi-million-dollar server budget was dropped. Digital Bros hold over 10 times more voting power in Starbreeze than any other shareholder. And, right now, Digital Bros is preparing for a potential custody battle over Payday's royalties and rights with Starbreeze. Now, here's the speculation. I think, and I might be wrong, I think the plan is, if Starbreeze doesn't earn enough to do as they promised, which is pay 505 Games $40 million via a third of Payday 3's sales, Digital Bros will attempt to use this already extant deadline of December 2024 to argue Starbreeze has not technically met all of its obligations for reconstruction, and then attempt to convert that debt into stock, thus giving them enough A shares to become the majority shareholder. Or perhaps Digital Bros could argue that the contract Starbreeze signed to secure the rights to the franchise has not been upheld, and is therefore nullified, which, depending on its terms, could theoretically default the ownership of the Payday IP back to 505 and thus Digital Bros. Or maybe I'm overthinking it. DB might be keeping it as simple as buying out shares from investors who get cold feet as Payday 3's player count drops, slowly accumulating control. If Digital Bros can jump to 51% of the voting power for Starbreeze's board, or convince just 10% of A shareholders that Payday 3 will never meet its projected performance numbers, if DB decide that Payday is worth more as an IP to sell off than it is as their live service title, they might just get their 40 mil yet, reassign everyone to work on Project Baxter and chase that Baldur's Gate bag. Or worse, fire as many people as it takes to profit off of whales on zombie IPs, just like they did to 505 Games. Personally, from everything I've read, I am of the belief that Digital Bros is giving Payday 3 until the end of 2024 to make them $40 million, or at least prove the game can make that much ever. And if it doesn't, Starbreeze and Payday as we know it could change forever. I might be wrong. I could be dead wrong. I know not the minds of businessmen from Italy or Sweden. But if I'm right, then I'd better hurry back from my break, as there might not be a Payday 3 left to review. I really hate to do this. I promised myself that I would get everything into one video, one piece that would cover the entirety of Payday, the whole story, so I could move on and be done with it. But then the script just kept getting longer and longer, and even as I'd cut shit, new stories would arrive. Like, I couldn't just not talk about the crime boss stuff, right? I overscoped, gave myself 6 months, and failed to deliver. I have life commitments in November and December that will leave me unavailable to be editing the rest of this video. Stuff I already have recorded. I already have so much written, but I just don't have time to finish it. If I rushed myself to finish the edit, I would be no better than the people I'm criticizing. I'd be a hypocrite. So, I am splitting this video up into parts. This is the end of part 1. I feel bad because it's almost like a bait and switch. Like this is a Payday 3 video, isn't it? I talk a lot about it. I meant to talk more about it. I really, really wish I could have gotten the next chapter in. I really do talk about it. But also, Starbreeze updated the game. New main menu, fixed some bugs. A lot of the same problems are still there, but it all looks different. And my video would be out of date, and everything else, all the other work that I've done would be attached to that out-of-date information. I'm not in my early 20s anymore. I can't rush to complete a video on time only for all of the information in it to become outdated one patch later. I won't do that to myself. So, expect part 2 sometime in the first half of 2025-ish. I gotta be nice to myself here. There is so much work to be done, even with what I've already written, and the story is probably gonna change by the time I get back. Starbreeze will probably still be here come 2025, so the game will still be around for me to review. And if you're all patient with me, I will get to it. I will get to it in so much detail. I will talk about Deep Silver. Yes, I will talk about Deep Silver. What else is there? I'll talk about the community, the voice actors, the story, all of it. The gameplay, especially the gameplay. I just don't have time, and it would all be out of date. So, end of part 1. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I don't have a Patreon, but I do have a Ko-fi, and if you wanted to kick a couple bucks my way for all this work, I'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, see you all next year. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe and take it easy.